This is the most tragic transmigration I've ever seen. The female protagonist's soul transmigrated twice, carrying a special ability with her, but in her second life, she clung to the wrong person. She met a tragic death, framed by the emperor and Su Miaolon, the legitimate daughter of Marquis Zhenghua, in the dilapidated cold palace. The regent prince, Gongju, walked in with a murderous aura, his eyes extremely cold. His eyes looked down on Gong Yimo, and the words he spoke were utterly indifferent. Gong Yimo, I've come to send you on your way. Speaking of which, as the regent prince, you should still call me Imperial Elder Sister. Gongju gave a perfunctory and cold smile. Oh, what if you're my Imperial Elder Sister? If he wants you dead, you must. Gong Yimo laughed up at the sky. She would never forget the tragic scene she witnessed that day. High on the dragon throne, Emperor Gong Che held Su Miaolon in his arms. The two were shamelessly affectionate right in front of her. The Empress. You are actually vicious and evil-hearted. It is Lan'er who is gentle, pure, and kind, and has truly won my heart. If you are disgraced, you can just get yourself to the cold palace. Gentle and kind? How ridiculous. In the cold palace, Su Miaolon slapped Gong Yimo to the ground. Beneath her beautiful exterior, she spoke such venomous words that don't let her die so easily. I want her to suffer every torture in the world. Beside her, Gongju replied indifferently, Lan'er, rest assured, this prince will fulfill all your wishes. The great regent prince, Gongju, was completely obedient to a woman, just like a loyal dog protecting its master. Gong Yimo found it utterly laughable you're so obedient to her that when she wanted another man, you sent her to the emperor's bed. Before she could finish speaking, the cold sword had already slit her throat with the speed of lightning. Lying in a pool of blood, Gong Yimo recalled the experiences of her two lives and secretly decided, if there's a next life, I, Gong Yimo, will never love anyone again. In the cold palace, Gong Yimo slowly woke up. Looking at her shrunken hands, she realized she had been reborn into her younger self and felt a sense of relief. At least she still had the cold palace to live in. Thinking about her difficult situation, she decided to act quickly to escape her predicament. The first step was to find food. After eating and drinking her fill, she was about to head back when she unexpectedly encountered a young boy being bullied. A servant was forcing the little boy to drink a mute-inducing poison. Seeing this, Gong Yimo launched an attack with steamed buns, scaring the servant into fleeing in panic. Just as Gong Yimo went forward to check on the boy's injuries, she got a clear look at his face and couldn't help but feel a surge of fear hiding behind a wall. Gongju. That's right. The little boy before her was none other than Gongju, the one who had cut her down in her past life. How could fate be so cruel? She had only wanted to save a child, but it turned out to be her ill-fated connection from her past life. If the enemy who killed you in your past life is now a cute and harmless little boy, what would you choose? Gong Yimo's luck was too terrible. Less than half an hour after being reborn, she ran into her enemy from her past life. She was so scared she was dumbfounded, keeping a 100-meter distance from Gongju. In the next moment, Gongju's little face turned pale. He put a small hand to his neck, gasping for breath with difficulty. She remembered what that old eunuch had said when he left. No wonder Gongju's voice in her past life was so unpleasant. No wonder Su Miaolon always gave loquat syrup to Gongju, and he, in turn, always helped Su Miaolon torture her. Gong Yimo recalled Gongju's tragic past and wrung her little hands, conflicted about whether to save him. If she saved him, what if he killed her again? What to do? Just as Gong Yimo hesitated, Gongju reached out a small hand, looking at her pitifully with his big, watery eyes. Oh my, Auntie Yimo says who could withstand this attack? Forget it. She had originally planned to leave him behind, but Chairman Mao taught us to be good children. As a modern woman of the 21st century, she really couldn't bring herself to stand by and do nothing for such an adorable little cutie. She walked over to Gongju, picked him up, and patted his back with her small hand to help him vomit. With Gong Yimo's help, he threw up all the poison he had just drunk. Gong Yimo thought to herself, to be in so much pain and not even cry out. This child's willpower is truly terrifyingly resilient. No wonder he became so twisted later. Fortunately, her personal dimension didn't disappear with her rebirth. Otherwise, not even a god could have saved him. Tada! Gong Yimo took a bottle of syrup from her dimension, unscrewed the cap. Her eyes, gentle as she looked at the little boy. Are you sure this girl isn't treating Gong Ju like a guinea pig? Drink this. She lifted Gong Ju's little chin and fed him the medicine. Instantly, Gong Ju felt the pain in his throat disappear. His big eyes were wide with shock. He never thought such a miraculous medicine existed in the world. Gong Yimo handed the rest of the syrup to Gong Ju. From now on, drink a little when your throat feels uncomfortable. Also, you are not allowed to tell any one about me. This lady would like to say, Yimo, isn't your expression a bit too kind? Just as Gong Ju was about to ask for Gong Yimo's name, he saw his frail imperial elder sister dash away, running as if she were being chased by a ghost. She's so fast. In the middle of the night, lightning flashed and thunder roared outside. Gong Yimo, wrapped in a thin blanket, huddled into a ball. What bad luck. On the first day of my rebirth, I saved the enemy who killed me in my past life. Actually, I'm still quite lucky. I'm just a princess without any backing from her mother's family. Unlike Gong Ju, whom everyone wants dead. I wonder how Gong Ju is doing now. Tui. Why am I thinking about that big pervert again? How he has nothing to do with me. But in this cold weather, and with such a serious injury, the more Gong Yimo thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. I'll just go take a look to make sure he's alive. And just like that, she headed out into the storm that I'm definitely not worried about him. I just think he's too pitiful. That's right, that's it. As soon as Gong Yimo entered the room, she slipped and fell, having an intimate encounter with the floor. She saw Gong Ju lying on the ground, his eyes closed and his little face flushed red. She quickly reached out a hand to feel him. Sure enough, he had a fever. Thinking about how a tiny child was poisoned and drenched in the rain, it would be strange if he didn't have a fever. Luckily, your imperial elder sister here transmigrated from the modern era before this rebirth and has a personal dimension with plenty of modern medicine. Otherwise, no one could save you today. She carefully fed the medicine to Gong Ju. After a short while, the little boy slowly opened his big eyes. He saw that it was the imperial elder sister who had saved him yesterday. With big, innocent eyes on his apple-cheeked face, he looked blankly at Gong Yimo. In a very soft, childish voice, he slowly thanked her. The simple thank you made Gong Yimo feel inexplicably refreshed. She could no longer keep a straight face, and her little face became smug. She laughed to the heavens internally. Who would have thought that the future regent who killed his father and brother would call her imperial elder sister and even apologize to her? Gong Yimo declared that she was in a very good mood today. She turned and tossed the rest of the medicine to little Gong Ju. Here's some more food and medicine. From now on, you're on your own. Hearing her footsteps fade away, little Gong Ju lowered his head in disappointment. Imperial elder sister, I suppose even you don't want to get involved with a troublemaker like me. This is the most speechless woman I've ever seen. In her past life, she died by her enemy's sword. As soon as she was reborn, she brought medicine to save her past life enemy. The reason was that the great villain was too cute as a child. In the early morning, Gong Yimo sat on her bed, meditating and circulating her energy. Fortunately, she still remembered the cultivation method from her previous life. After circulating her energy for less than 4 hours, she had completely dispelled the fever from being caught in the rain last night. Just then, the door to the cold palace was unceremoniously pushed open. In the distance, a palace made with a furious expression walked in carrying a meal. Gong Yimo, feigning illness, let out a yawn. You little wretch, time to eat. She slammed the porridge onto the table and said irritably, you've been sick for 4 years, and you're not dead yet. You're lucky. Just then, Gong Yimo pulled out a blood-stained handkerchief from somewhere. Timidly, she said, Sister, could I have consumption? This terrified the palace maid. Consumption was contagious. She was so frightened that she ran out. Gong Yimo smiled in relief. Now, no one would dare to come near and disturb her cultivation. A short while later, several eunuchs quickly quarantined the area, leaving only a small window for delivering food. Gong Yimo didn't waste any opportunity to cultivate. She had to practice diligently. Only when her skills were accomplished could she protect herself in this man-eating imperial palace. 2 months later, after the rain, the sun, light shone down brilliantly. Gong Yimo reached out and caught a falling leaf. With a whoosh, she shot it forward. The leaf which had been as soft as thin paper just a moment ago, instantly became sharp and lodged itself straight into a tree trunk. You think that's all? A whirlwind then rose around a tree, and the leaves fell like rain that I've finally broken through. I'm even stronger than in my last life. What's going on? She clearly remembered that the aging technique in her previous life didn't have this effect. Could it be because she was too impetuous in her past life? The cultivation method she practiced was called Ziren, which emphasized a calm and peaceful mind. She never expected that in this life, her lack of desires would inadvertently lead her to master the technique. At that moment, the small window on the door slowly opened with a creak. A large, still warm chicken leg was passed through the small window. A couple of days ago, someone sent steamed buns, and today a chicken leg. Could it be that the people of the cold palace had a sudden burst of kindness? Gong Yimo craned her little head to look outside. She didn't know if she underestimated the window or the window underestimated her. The Conan-possessed Gong Yimo felt that this was not so simple. She had to find out the truth. With that thought, she used her lightness skill to leap onto the wall and saw a figure in the distance. It was Gong Ju. He walked into the adjacent courtyard, separated from her only by a wall. What did he move here? Wasn't he afraid of catching consumption? Gong Yimo squatted in a corner of the palace wall, hidden by a large tree. She saw the little boy bring a basin of water to clean the dirt off himself. Surviving in this cold palace was already difficult, yet he was still bringing her food. Before Gong Yimo could think further, a flurry of hurried footsteps approached, mixed with the sharp voice of a eunuch that it was him. He's the one who stole the things. A eunuch grabbed little Gong Ju, insolence. Who gave you the nerve to lay a hand on a prince? Hearing his words, the surrounding eunuchs laughed mockingly. Listen to him. He still thinks he's a prince. With that, he tore open the paper package, revealing leftover food inside. Oh my God, there's even a hamburger in there. Sorry, got sidetracked. Let's continue. A eunuch pushed little Gong Ju to the ground that I never thought a prince would. Steal things. Your Highness must be very hungry right now. Why don't your Highness eat the leftovers on the ground? Then we won't pursue the crime of theft. From aside, how could Gong Yimo not know what was happening? She pursed her little lips, her face full of anger. This is just too much bullying. At that moment, the head eunuch arrogantly approached the little boy. He kicked him to the ground again and took a sharp silver needle from his sleeve, grinning maliciously. He was about to stab little Gong Ju when suddenly a pebble shot out from the left and embedded itself directly into that eunuch's head. Instantly, blood splattered everywhere. Someone's been killed. It wasn't until the man collapsed and stopped breathing that the other two eunuchs, their faces pale with fright, started screaming. They scrambled towards the gate without a second thought. Gong Yimo leaped down. She saw the little boy picking up the trampled food from the ground, his eyes filled with struggle. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Thank you for taking care of me during this time. A golden brown, roasted chicken leg appeared before him. He looked up and saw it was his imperial elder sister from next door. Gong Yimo's small hand gently rested on the little boy's head. Eat this first to fill your stomach. Tonight, imperial elder sister will take you to eat. This woman is so pitiful, reborn twice, and she still couldn't outweed the ancient people. Perhaps even the heavens couldn't bear to watch anymore, feeling she was a disgrace to our transmigration squad. So they let her be, reborn once more. But this girl, of all things, actually befriended the enemy who killed her in her past life. At this moment, Father Heaven must have already fainted in the bathroom. At night, from the Zhoping Palace, surrounded by peach blossoms and shadows, Gong Yimo's basketball-sized little head peeked out. She lifted a roof tile and looked down. She saw a woman of about 20 holding a mirror and asking the palace maid beside her, "How long has it been since the emperor came?" The little palace maid weakly replied, It's been more than half a year." Perched on the roof, Gong Yimo waved her hand dismissively. This concubine Zhou is so dramatic. She even needs to put on makeup just to eat. Her big head turned to the side. Oh my God, a person, a real-life vanishing act? A small hand reached out from behind and whispered, "Imperial elder sister, I'm here." Looking at the little boy still hanging from the eaves, Gong Yimo felt very impatient internally. He's so much trouble. What are the chances of one accomplice pulling another accomplice down with them? Luckily, Gong Yimo knew martial arts and strenuously pulled the little boy. Up. I can only use mosquito coil, smoke to repel you. What is this thing you brought? How dare a lowly palace made like you try to fool me? Concubine Joe's sharp voice rang out, startling them both. Even if I am out of favor, I'm not someone to slave like you can bully. Concubine Joe's beautiful face was filled with a venomous expression. She viciously grabbed the little palace maid's hair and pushed her to the ground. What are you standing there for? Drag her out and execute her. With both hands, the little palace maid, her face pale with fright, trembled uncontrollably, begging, "Please, your highness, spare my life. Please, your highness, spare my life." Seeing the palace maid being dragged away with a deathly pale face, Concubine Joe's mood instantly brightened. Witnessing everything, Gong Yimo clenched her little fists, feeling that she was about to lose control of her primordial power. This is simply too much. Thinking of this, she turned to go down, but was pulled back by the little boy. "Imperial elder sister, what are you doing?" Gong Yimo pulled her hand back and said matter-of-factly, "Of course I'm going to save her. What else would I be doing? Eating." Gongju hesitated and advised, "The masters in the palace have the power of life and death over the servants. This is the right of the superiors." This was a principle his imperial father had taught him. Gong Yimo gave the little boy's head a smack and calmly told him, "The greatest power a true superior holds in their hands is not punishment but mercy. Not punishment but mercy." Gong Yimo had no idea that everything from her past life would change because of this sentence. After speaking, she leaped away to save the little palace maid. Any more delay and the little maid might lose her life. In the quiet forest, the chirping of insects was exceptionally clear, mixed with the chaos of the night. The eunuch from before was being beaten black and blue by Gong Yimo. I believe if his mother were standing next to him, she would definitely not recognize how much this young man resembled his former self. The little eunuch scrambled away in a sorry state. The rescued palace maid hid behind a tree, crying her heart out, sobbing. Bitterly, Gong Yimo thought, "I saved you, and not only do you not thank me, but why are you crying even harder? Do you want to live or not?" Hearing this, the little palace maid cried even harder. Of course I want to live, but her highness won't let us go. That's not necessarily true. Go find the head manager of the Cold Palace and say you offended Concubine Joe and are volunteering to go to the Cold Palace to take care of that sick princess. Seeing a glimmer of hope, the little palace maid's big eyes lit up as she asked, "Really? Is that possible?" Gong Yimo nodded affirmatively. "They will agree. Go quickly." Now, she could only treat a dead horse as a live one. The little palace maid pouted and went to find the head manager. After handling this matter, it was time to deal with that arrogant Concubine Joe. In Luoyan Hall, Gong Yimo, with her face covered, gave Concubine Joe a good beating with a stick. This woman is truly too fierce. She held the stick against Concubine Joe's head, glaring fiercely at the weak Concubine Joe. "Oh, you still dare to casually beat and curse its servants." How could Concubine Joe have ever seen such a terrifying sight? She begged for mercy in every way possible, promising, "I won't dare to do it again. Little Granny, please let me go. You know what's good for you." As Gong Yimo was leaving, she grabbed a chicken and made another threat before finally departing. The little boy heard the footsteps behind him and quickly turned his little head. "Imperial sister, you're back. Look what I brought for you." Looking at the fragrant roasted chicken before him, the little boy felt like he couldn't control his eyes. Gong Yimo very generously tore off a large chicken leg for him. "That servant, I saved her. From now on, she'll take care of you." Saying this, she reached out her small hand and vigorously kneaded the little boy's chubby cheeks. "This feels just as good as I imagined. Very, very good." But the little boy was not happy to hear this. He hugged Gong Yimo and started crying. "Imperial elder sister, you deliberately found someone else to take care of me. Do you think I'm a bother and don't want me anymore? Please don't abandon me." Okay, she was a transmigrated female protagonist with powerful martial arts and a personal dimension. She was supposed to have a happy life, but for a man, she brought high-tech from a world that didn't belong here into this era, causing countless rivers of blood. Heaven gave her another chance, letting her return to before it all happened. Her enemy from her past life was now looking at her with big, watery eyes, pitifully begging her not to abandon him. Gong Yimo had wanted to get rid of this past life enemy, but her heart softened once again. No matter what in this life, he was still a child and had not yet stained his hand with blood. In their past life, neither of them was a good person. Who could say who was right and who was wrong? In this life, she wanted to give herself and this child a chance. Killing could never solve the problem. Beneath the red bricks and green tiles of the flowery terrace, the two got along exceptionally well. Such a beautiful scene seemed to be arranged by the heavens. The two of them had no idea that because of Gong Yimo's rebirth, everything from their past life was heading in an unknown direction. Imperial Elder Sister, we've known each other for so long, but I still don't know your name. My name is Gong Ju. What about you, Imperial Elder Sister? My name is Gong Yimo, she said nonchalantly while taking a bite of chicken leg. Gong Yimo, as in Xiangru Yimo. This was not just her name, but also a Blood Iron Emperor's vow to her mother. He had a harem of 3,000, yet he only wanted to live in mutual support with her mother. Speaking of sad things, her expression became serious as she urged Gong Ju, in the future, you must be a man who honors his promises. Don't be like my imperial father, who made a promise but couldn't protect her. The 4-year-old Gong Ju touched his little head. It was the first time he had heard of one life, one love, one couple. The next moment, he grabbed Gong Yimo's little hand, his expression incredibly serious. Then in the future, I will also only marry one person. As he spoke, he pulled Gong Yimo and made a vow to her, be by the heavens above. I swear that in this life, I will definitely protect Imperial Elder Sister. Gong Yimo looked at her little cub and shed tears of sorrow. This cub wasn't raised in vain. The next day, Gong Yimo began to teach Gong Ju, teaching him to read and write. By the way, isn't this book breaking through the screen? Gong Ju's big eyes sparkled. What an exquisite book. Gong Yimo secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Now his values wouldn't be the same as in his past life. At this moment, the little palace maid, sure, walked in dejectedly. Didn't you go to get food? Why did you come back empty-handed? Hearing Gong Yimo's question, Shir's eyes welled up with tears of grievance. Just now, when I went to get food, they drove me away again. Hearing this, Gong Yimo smiled and comforted Shir that if we can't get it, then we'll go get it ourselves. At this, Gong Ju, who was reading, stood up. Imperial Elder Sister, I want to go with you. He patted his small chest firmly that I also want to protect you. Gong Yimo shook her head and refused. Gong Ju's situation in the palace was very dangerous right now. In that case, she would be the one to take the lead. With that, she left a dejected Gong Ju behind and walked away. Gong Ju's chubby face was filled with helpless frustration, and I want to go with you too. At the imperial kitchen, Matron Su, her face full of wrinkles, was leisurely lying on a rocking chair, sunbathing. Just then, the door was kicked open. Matron Su was startled awake and roared at the door. Who dares to be so insolent here? In the distance, 2 figures slowly approached. Matron Su looked at them disdainfully. Isn't it just an unfavored girl? With that, she plopped back down on the chair. I was wondering who had such a temper. It turns out to be the 7th princess who lives in the cold palace. What? Has your consumption been cured? Hearing Matron Su's sharp mockery, Shir weakly hid behind Gong Yimo's hand. Oh, it was you who bullied her. So what if it was me? The power is in my hands. I can bully whoever I want. She stood there smiling, completely unafraid of the palace maid's gazes. Although I was sent to the cold palace, my status as a princess has not been betrayed. If you treat me like this, aren't you afraid I'll one day rise up and retaliate against you? Although her voice was childish, to Matron Su's ears, it made her hair stand on end for some reason. The matrons in the palace are truly the fighter jets among black widows. Not only did she embezzle the princess's meals, but she also spoke wildly and threatened the little princess. But what Matron Su didn't know was that the current Gong Yimo was no longer the pushover she used to be. Gong Yimo clenched her little fists, a smirk on her face as she retorted to Matron Su, although I was sent to the cold palace, my status as a princess has not been revoked. Then, Gong Yimo cornered Matron Su against the lounge chair, staring at her with fierce eyes. Even the most unfavored princess will be married off for a political alliance. If you treat me like this, don't ask me for a tissue when you're crying your eyes out later. After speaking, Gong Yimo snatched Matron Su's fan. Matron Su shouted, my fan. This was the first fan the emperor had gifted her after she entered the palace, and it held deep meaning for her. But now, it was being torn to shreds in Gong Yimo's hands. Gong Yimo warned her, "One must play the long game to catch a big fish. Don't get caught up in your current authority and ruin the rest of your life. There's no medicine for regret then, you know." Matron Su looked at the little girl in front of her in shock. She never expected someone so young to be so skilled at scheming. In the future, she would have to guard against fire, water, and this little son. The next second, Matron Su's face changed as she began to fawn over Gong Yimo. She massaged Gong Yimo's shoulders and insincerely apologized to her, saying it was the servants below who were not sensible and had neglected the princess's meals. Gong Yimo immediately defended herself. "Am I wrongly accusing you, Matron Su? Don't you have any idea of the little tricks you've been playing?" Matron Su was speechless. She immediately put on her most skilled professional cackle. Gong Yimo didn't want to waste any more words. Besides, she hadn't eaten lunch yet. She didn't have the energy to argue with this petty person all day. With a roll of her eyes, she warned Matron Su not to be so petty in the future, then left with the palace maid sure, dusting off her hands. Matron Su respectfully saw them off, telling Gong Yimo that she would have someone send the meal over immediately. After Gong Yimo left, Matron Su was puzzled, wondering if the seventh princess had eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. How could even her tone of voice be so different from before? Matron Su decided to report the anomaly and ordered the palace maids beside her not to skimp on Gong Yimo's food anymore. Matron Su was scared. She didn't want to provoke this little brat anymore. After all, saving her own skin was more important. Back at Lingxiu Courtyard, Gong Yimo and Gong Ju, these two little foodies, sat obediently at the dining table, waiting for the palace, made to bring the delicious food so they could feast. The serving eunuch kindly reminded them not to overeat. But at this moment, in Gong Yimo's eyes, there was only food and Gong Ju. With selective hearing, she couldn't hear the eunuch's words at all. She picked up a meat bun and put in Gong Ju's bowl. But Gong Ju slammed his chopsticks on the table, angrily stating that reasoning with servants was complete nonsense. Only speaking with fists would truly make them submit. This sentence made Gong Yimo spit out her food. She picked up her chopsticks and tapped Gong Ju on the head. "Did you read the book I just taught you for nothing? Can fists talk? We must persuade people with reason." After hearing Gong Yimo's lecture, Gong Ju instantly became a little mute, not daring to make a sound. Gong Yimo never expected that Gong Ju's brutality was innate from birth. If she continued to let him be, the result would be the same as in her previous life. She would once again become a soul lost to Gong Ju's sword. As soon as the thought came to her, she put on a mature tone. "Child, listen to your imperial elder sister's advice. We are weak and powerless now. We can't reveal our trump cards too early." After hearing this, Gong Ju blinked his big, sparkling eyes with a look that said, "Imperial elder sister, I understand. You mean we either don't make a move or we eradicate them completely." Wow. Is there a problem with this child's comprehension? What did she say? Anything about eradicating them completely? After hearing Gong Yimo's guidance, Gong Ju's eyes were filled with determination as he said he wanted to learn martial arts. What? Gong Yimo couldn't quite believe it. She wished she had gone deaf. In her previous life, it was because Gong Ju's martial arts were far superior to hers that she met such an end. Gong Ju was a natural at martial arts, but teaching him, Gong Yimo felt a bit uneasy. After all, everything in her past life had really happened. It was impossible for her not to mind. When your enemy from a past life wants to learn martial arts from you in this life, and even wants to become your sworn brother, what should you do? Gong Ju wanted to learn martial arts from his imperial elder sister, but Gong Yimo was hesitant. A Gong Ju who knew martial arts would be like a wild horse on the prairie. Who would dare to provoke him? Gong Ju, with his big, charming eyes, pitifully tugged on Gong Yimo's sleeve, whining softly, "Imperial elder sister, please agree. After I master martial arts, I will protect only you." Seeing this guy resort to whining at the drop of a hat, Gong Yimo thought, "You're the boss. Forget martial arts. I'd give you my life. I will not only teach you martial arts, but I will also make you knowledgeable in astronomy and geography and hold supreme imperial power. Whatever you want, Imperial Elder Sister will give it to you. But Imperial Elder Sister has only one question for you. In the future, will you betray me?" Without hearing a satisfactory answer, Gong Ju ran out with his short legs. He knelt heavily in the courtyard. Ancestors of the Gong family, with descendant Gong Ju makes a vow here. "In this life, I will never do anything to harm my Imperial Elder Sister. If I break this vow, may I be struck down by heaven and earth. Gong Yimo covered her mouth. It would be a lie to say she wasn't surprised. She never expected the young Gong Ju to say such words. The shock in her heart was immense. She excitedly pinched Gong Ju's little face and said with great magnanimity, "From now on, we are sworn sisters, the kind that shares blessings and endures hardships together." Hearing his imperial elder sister's words, Gong Ju's little face was also very happy, his heart filled with infinite hope for the future. Winter came and summer went. 3 years passed in a flash. The 9-year-old Gong Ju had grown into a true, handsome little boy. Another 6 years later, in the willow-filled and breezy Lingxiu courtyard, a young girl was lying sideways on a bed, her beautiful long hair spread out. Just from her back, one could tell this girl must be extraordinarily beautiful. Imperial elder sister, why aren't you up yet? If you don't have breakfast every day, how can that be? A large foot pushed the door open. Imperial elder sister, if you continue to sleep, I'll have to carry you and the blanket out together. The person who came in was Gong Ju, 9 years later. He was dressed in a black and white robe, his hands hidden in his sleeves, and a silver coronet held his dark hair up high. Most striking were his handsome, yet resolute features. What a handsome young man. Hearing Gong Ju's threat, Gong Yimo reluctantly rubbed her eyes. What time is it? Disturbing someone's sweet dreams. With that, she gestured to Gong Ju. Gong Ju, come here for a moment. While Gong Ju was stunned, Gong Yimo grabbed him by the neck. You brat, who did you learn this from these past few years? Why are you so naggy? AI, the child has grown up, and even the feel of his cheeks isn't as good as before. A wicked smile appeared on Gong Ju's lips as he slowly approached Gong Yimo. Imperial elder sister, you must keep your word. You clearly said you would teach me 2 new lessons today. You can't go back on your word. His voice was deep and magnetic, his warm breath spraying on Gong Yimo's neck, making her blush uncontrollably. Gong Yimo, embarrassed and angry, lay back on the bed with an expression of a hero going off to his doom, never to return. Imperial elder sister, if you insist on being like this, then don't blame me for not being polite. He lifted the blanket and pressed Gong Yimo down on the bed. Oh my God, this is killing this lady. This kid is too good at flirting. Gong Ju slowly got up and leaned down, slowly approaching Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was already on a path of no return, being threatened by her own cub. Gong Ju flipped over and pressed Gong Yimo onto the bed. His large hand restlessly moved to Gong Yimo's waist. Gong Yimo burst out laughing and scolding. Help, it tickles. Gong Ju, you're dead. Gong Yimo's internal energy had just broken through the 3rd level. She used her absolute internal force to flip Gong Ju over and sat astride. You little rascal, you still want to be impolite to me? You're still not as good. Both of Gong Ju's hands were pinned by Gong Yimo, unable to move. Her small hands mischievously roamed over Gong Ju's body, tickling him hard. Seeing that this guy wasn't affected at all, she pouted in frustration. Why isn't this guy ticklish at all? It must be because of the clothes that he can't feel it. She directly tore open Gong Ju's clothes, revealing his strong 8-pack abs, completely oblivious to the young man's already flushed handsome face. These scars. I didn't expect those old wounds haven't healed yet. What kind of life did he live before I came? She reached out her jade-like hand in distress, wanted to touch those scars, but was grabbed by Gong Ju. Stop fooling around. At this moment, Gong Ju's handsome face changed again. While Gong Yimo was in a daze, Gong Ju's large hand grabbed Gong Yimo's hands and pulled her under him again. Imperial elder sister, you're really not obedient. Gong Ju looked at the little woman under him, his eyes filled with deep helplessness and indulgence. Gong Yimo's red lips moved, unconvinced. I could be even more disobedient. If Imperial elder sister insists, then don't blame me for using force. With that, his large hands lifted Gong Yimo and carried her towards the door. He was completely unfazed by her threats. Listening to the playful fight in the room, smiled leisurely. The relationship between these 2 siblings is still so good. Gong Ju, put me down. Believe it or not, I'll dismantle your bed. Gong Ju gently placed her on the stone chair, his head rubbing against Gong Yimo's. If Imperial Elder Sister dismantles my bed, then I'll have no choice but to share a bed with Imperial Elder Sister. Who knew that Gong Yimo wasn't afraid of him at all? She fearlessly said, I was just worried that hugging a blanket didn't feel good. Looking at his Imperial Elder Sister who didn't play by the rules, Gong Ju smiled helplessly. I really don't know what to do with you. In a certain palace, a noble woman with a cloud-like hairdo and a phoenix robe was reclining on the phoenix couch, listening to a palace maid's report. Your Highness, a letter has arrived from the Prime Minister saying that the Prince of Jinshi, Li Changfeng, is coming to celebrate the Empress Dowager's birthday and is already on his way. The Empress sat up majestically, a cold glint in her eyes. Over the years, she had gone to great lengths to intercept the Prince of Jinshi's men. If the Prince of Jinshi couldn't return to the capital, the one coming now would not be his son. With that, she had the palace maid keep a close eye on Consort Xian. Consort Xian had always seen Gong Ju as a thorn in her side. Now that the Prince of Jinshi's son was entering the palace, Consort Xian would probably not be able to sit still. The Empress's lips curved into a cold smile as she instructed the palace maid, let Consort Xian do whatever she wants. We just need to sit back and reap the rewards. This child, raised by Gong Yimo like her own brother, held unspeakable feelings for her. The night was hazy. Gong Yimo was teaching Gong Ju to read. She was a complete night owl. The later it got, the more energetic she became. At this moment, Shir brought over some wedding cakes. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up as she looked at the exquisite pastries. Shir, what did you bring? They're so delicate. Shir said with a smile, these are wedding cakes. The newly favored concubine, Li, has given birth to a son. The emperor is overjoyed and the whole family is celebrating. Hearing that his imperial father had another child, Gong Ju's expression fell that we are all the imperial father's children. Outside, it's all flowers and brocade, while we are left to fend for ourselves in the cold palace. Gong Yimo sighed and comforted him softly. Whether a child in the palace can grow up safely is not determined by where they live. What's more, concubine Li is the imperial father's cousin. Children born from close relatives are prone to congenital disabilities. So you see, prohibiting marriage between close relatives is a scientific and responsible act. As soon as she finished speaking, Gong Ju grabbed Gong Yimo's arm. He asked anxiously, what if we don't have children? Is it okay not to have children? If one listened carefully, one could hear a trace of nervousness in Gong Ju's voice when he said this. Gong Yimo flicked away the approaching boy. There are so many women in the world. It's not like you have to marry a close relative. What are you worrying about? He looked at Gong Yimo with his dark eyes. He didn't seem to know what he was doing himself. It was just strange. The thought of her marrying someone else made him feel an uncontrollable urge to trap her in his own domain. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from outside. The sound was very light. If Gong Yimo hadn't been practicing martial arts for years, it would have been difficult to hear. She covered Gong Ju's mouth, signaling him not to make a sound. There's someone outside. At that moment, a dart shot straight towards them. As it passed over Gong Yimo's head, she caught it. With a flick of her wrist, she sent the dart, flying back, hitting one of the men outside in the chest. Seeing their companion die, the others charged forward together. They had thought it would be an extremely simple mission, but they didn't expect their opponent to be so skilled. They didn't know which power was protecting this unfavored prince. Hearing the sounds outside, a hint of alarm appeared on Gong Ju's handsome face. He felt that many people had come this time. He reacted immediately, drawing his sword and tossing it to Gong Yimo. At this moment, the assassins had already kicked open the door and rushed in. Those men didn't notice Gong Yimo at the side and charged straight for Gong Ju. As soon as they clashed, Gong Yimo knew something was wrong. The intruders were all experts. Who would be so reckless as to attack a child? Gong Ju had been practicing martial arts since he was young, but he had never truly fought with anyone before. At first, it was very difficult. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Ju was no match for the men in black and shouted, Gong Ju, let me take over. Gong Yimo placed her jade-like hand on Gong Ju's shoulder her toes tapping on Gongju's sword, and charged directly at the men in black. "You dare to assassinate my imperial brother? Then you will pay the price." She swung her sword, looking like an unstoppable force. The seriousness and focus on her face were something Gongju had never seen before. In your heart, she is a peerless hero. When Gongju held Gong Yimo tightly in his arms, their fate had just begun. Gong Yimo swung her sword and pierced through one of the assassin's chest. "Little girl, since you love meddling in other people's business so much, I'll send you on your way first." With that, he swung his sword with sharp eyes and stabbed at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo looked at the approaching sword and froze for a moment, stunned. "Imperial elder sister, be careful." Gongju rushed over like the wind, catching the incoming sword with his bare hands and pulling Gong Yimo into his arms. He looked at the assassin with cold eyes. "With me here, no one will touch a single hair on my imperial elder sister's head, let alone harm her." He pushed aside the sword with his bare hands and kicked the assassin to the ground. Neither of them noticed the man in black slowly approaching from behind. Just as Gongju was completely unaware, the man viciously slashed at Gongju's arm. Lacking strength, he supported himself with his sword. Even though he was now completely exhausted, he still held Gong Yimo tightly in his arms, comforting her gently. "Imperial elder sister, don't be afraid. I will protect you." The assassin gave them no time to recover and charged again, aiming his blade at Gongju's back. Gong Yimo pushed Gongju away and met the attack again. Catching the assassin off guard, she stabbed him in the chest. Instantly, blood splattered again. Gong Yimo shielded Gongju behind her and shouted without looking back, "Now Gongju, go find Imperial Father for help. Otherwise, neither of us will survive." With that, she grabbed Gongju and pushed him out the door. From behind came Yimo's sharp cry, "Don't dawdle. Go!" His heart tightened, and he ran towards the most bustling part of the palace. "Imperial elder sister, I will definitely come back to save you. Wait for me." Seeing Gongju leave, the man in black was about to give chase, but was stopped by Gong Yimo's flying fire meteor technique. She blocked the doorway, a smile playing on her lips. "I in such a hurry? Are you going to silence someone? Or to report back? You'll have to get past me first." At this time, in the most prosperous part of the palace, Choyang Hall, it was lively with song and dance. The man before them, who looked to be in his early 30s with thick eyebrows, big eyes, an 8-pack, and a powerful aura, was Emperor Yisham. At this moment, he was holding a beauty in his arms. The beauty slowly leaned closer to Gongsheng and fed a cherry from her lips to the great Gongsheng. His long fingers gently caressed the beauty's red lips. He said in a very flirtatious manner, so sweet. At this moment, a white-haired head eunuch hurried over and whispered in his ear, "Your Majesty, the 9th prince is seeking an audience outside the palace." The noble emperor raised an eyebrow at, "Oh, I don't recall having such. This emperor is too cruel. His own son is fighting assassins outside, while he is lost in a world of pleasure." As members of the same royal bloodline, they could laugh and talk in the Jinlan Hall, while he and his imperial elder sister could only huddle in a corner of the cold palace. At this moment, Gongju's heart was already consumed by hatred, as if he had become a killing machine. The rain poured down. Gongju was soaked in blood. He walked toward Choyang Hall, one step, one kill. As long as he could protect his imperial elder sister's safety, what did it matter if he became a demon of slaughter? One day, whether it's the empress or the princes, even the emperor, their life and death will be decided by a single thought from me, Gongju. At this moment, Gongju's killing intent was incredibly firm. With a swing of his blade, he took another life. This time, he was stopped again, looking at the calm, composed, and well-trained golden-armored guards before him. Gongju was secretly on alert. These were definitely not ordinary guards. His crimson pupils were filled with bloodlust. With one thrust of his sword, he pierced through the chest of one of the guards. The 2 years of being unsupervised in the cold palace had made his personality arrogant and ruthless. It was this ruthlessness that, after a short clash, reduced the elite troop of more than 10 men to just the last two. Be why His Majesty's decree. Anyone who trespasses into the palace will be executed without mercy. Do you still not retreat? He was so frightened by Gongju's murderous aura that he trembled. He stammered out the sentence. Hearing the guard's words, he sneered, then burst into loud laughter. "To this point, what do you think can stop me?" Just as he was about to kill the guard with a swing of his sword, a horsetail whisk appeared and blocked him. Looking closely, it was the emperor's right-hand man, Changshi. He bowed to Gongju with a serious expression. "Your Highness, please return. His Majesty has decreed that today is a day of great celebration for the whole nation, so your Highness's crime of trespassing is pardoned. If there is a next time, you'll be executed without mercy." Executed without mercy. These 4 words pressed down like a high wall, bringing a sense of despair. He was just one step away. Was it all going to be in vain? What a fine executed without mercy. Is this the imperial father I once adored? On one hand, he celebrates the birth of a new son, and on the other, he tells another son executed without mercy. The imperial family is heartless and fickle. If that was the case, why did he tolerate him killing his way here? At this moment, Gongju seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. He swung his sword directly at Changshi. But she was also a martial artist and the top expert in the palace. Just as Changshi was about to make a move, the emperor has arrived. A eunuch's announcement came from behind. Both of them froze. This was the first time in over 10 years that Gongju had seen his imperial father. He never thought their reunion would be in such a blood-soaked scene. Before the bright lamps, the emperor and empress walked towards them, followed by concubine Li and consort Lucienne. "You finally came out. Someone killing your people right under your nose has finally crossed your bottom line and made you unable to sit still." Gongsheng walked up to Gongju, a smile on his lips as he sized him up. "Oh, you are my 9th son. You injured the guards and forced your way into the palace. Are you not afraid of death?" Gongju's body went limp, and he knelt directly before Gongsheng, pleading loudly, "Assassins have attacked the cold palace at night. My imperial elder sister is in grave danger. I beg imperial father to save her." His kneeling was met with ridicule from the maids and concubines nearby. He had to endure it. Even for his imperial elder sister, he had to endure it. His thin body stood tall in the cold wind. If one looked closely, the hand holding the sword hilt was trembling. Not hearing Gongsheng speak, he pleaded loudly again, "I beg imperial father to save my imperial elder sister." Look at that sickly but unyielding young man. Once again for his imperial elder sister. Look at that sickly but unyielding young man. Once again for his imperial elder sister, bowing his noble head to the father he hated most. With every kowtow, he said, "I beg imperial father to save her." Soon, his forehead was bleeding, but he was completely unaware. It didn't matter. It was a matter of his imperial elder sister's life and death, let alone a small matter like kowtowing. Even if he had to cast aside all his pride and beg on the ground, it wouldn't matter. Gongsheng closed his eyes, sighed, and finally spoke. "Dedo, I actually have a daughter in the cold palace." "What's her name?" He spoke slowly, but the words that came out stunned Gongju. He didn't remember. He never even remembered that he had a son and a daughter trapped in the cold palace. "Imperial father, back then, you named my imperial elder sister Yimo, signifying your wish to live in mutual support with consort Shui. After consort Shui passed away, have you even forgotten this name?" His cold, sarcastic, and angry words made the smile on Gongsheng's face freeze. And the empress at the side had a murderous look in her eyes. Xiangru Yimo, a great emperor living in mutual support with another woman. "What does that make me, the empress?" After a long while, Gongsheng chuckled lightly. Interesting. Speaking of which, I'm really curious to know who dares to kill my child right under my nose." The emperor, who had been smiling just a moment ago, his face instantly turned completely grim. With that, his cold gaze shot towards those behind him. "As for the rest of you, come with me to take a look." Consort Lucien's face fell. "Can't even stop a child. What a bunch of trash." And Gongju at the side, after hearing Gongsheng's words, finally felt his heart settle. "Imperial elder sister, I did it. I'm bringing people to save you now. You must wait for me." In the cold palace, Gong Yimo was still in a fierce battle with the assassins. Just as the cold sword tip was only an inch from Gong Yimo's neck, a eunuch's announcement came from outside. How did that kid Gongju get back so quickly? In the assassin's moment of hesitation, it created an opportunity for Gong Yimo. She kicked the assassin in the chest, sending him flying. She looked at the assassin with an indifferent gaze. Those who should come and those who shouldn't have all come. Why not see if your master, the emperor, has arrived? Gong Yimo was on the ground, interrogating the assassin. This scene made consort Lucien scream in fear and throw herself into Gongsheng's arms. The empress at the side looked at her disdainfully. "You bitch, You're clearly the one who sent the assassins. Stop pretending to be innocent. Today, I will expose your hypocritical, true face. She grabbed Gong Yimo's shoulder and lowered her voice. This person is the assassin. Princess, hand him over to me, your mother empress, and I will surely bring you justice. She spoke with great righteousness, but her mind was racing, calculating whether she could use this assassin to make consort Lucien suffer a great loss. Silence. At this moment, Gong Sheng at the side spoke impatiently. Men, take the assassin down and interrogate him severely. Gong Yimo raised her small hand, and no need to trouble yourselves. With that, she thrust her sword down, and blood splattered all over her face. After it was done, she playfully winked at Gong Sheng. Imperial father, this person wanted to kill me. It's not too much for me to kill him myself, right? Gong Sheng looked at the decisive girl before him. There was no trace of bloodthirstiness. She was indeed like his child. Before Gong Sheng could speak, the empress at the side, her face contorted, ordered arrest Gong Yimo. Killing someone in front of the emperor is a grave crime and cannot be forgiven. No one knew why she killed that man. Only Gong Ju understood her intention. He broke free from Chang Shi and ran out. The crowd stood directly in front of Gong Yimo. As long as I'm here today, none of you will even think of touching a single hair on my imperial sister's head. His gaze turned to Gong Yimo. You deliberately killed someone in front of the emperor to protect me and take all the blame, didn't you? Imperial sister, I'm no longer a child. I can protect you now too. Consort Xian watched as her people were killed. A dark glint flashed in the depths of her eyes, and the corners of her mouth curved into a sinister smile. She was seen rubbing her head, her voice delicate and soft. Your Majesty, tonight was supposed to be a joyous occasion. For the 9th prince and the 7th princess to go on a killing spree in the inner palace is truly inauspicious. After hearing Consort Xian's words, a clamor arose from the crowd. When a prince breaks the law, he is as guilty as a commoner. To be so skilled in martial arts at such a young age is truly suspicious. So ruthless and cruel. If he is not eliminated now, he will surely be a danger to the state in the future. Hearing the discussions behind her, the corners of Consort Xian's lips curved into a triumphant smile. Listening to those vicious words, Gong Ju's body trembled. It felt as if something massive in his head was about to break out of its shell. They were clearly just trying to protect themselves. Why did all these people want them dead? A pair of Crimson Phoenix eyes firmly memorized the faces of these people. All of you who have harmed my imperial sister, I will not let a single one of you go. This world is not as beautiful as imperial sister described. It is filthy and chaotic. Only slaughter can cleanse it. Oh no, this kid has turned to the dark side. All the negative emotions seemed about to erupt, causing the killing intent in Gong Ju's body to boil like lava. Just as he was about to lose control, Gong Yimo hugged him tightly from behind, her voice gentle as she comforted him. Don't be afraid. Imperial sister is here. Hearing his imperial sister's familiar voice, Gong Ju's sanity gradually returned. What has happened to me? Feeling the warmth of Gong Yimo's embrace. Imperial sister, I'm so glad you are in my world. I'm so glad you didn't destroy the world. It is filthy and chaotic. Only eternal slaughter can cleanse this world. Only Gong Yimo is his salvation. The emperor looked at the two people covered in blood before him and slowly spoke. Where is the head manager of the cold palace? Just as her face turned pale, Matron Su was brought forward under duress. Why child was senselessly assassinated. You failed to manage the cold palace properly. After speaking, he directly ordered Matron Li to be beaten to death. This was an emperor who held the power of life and death. A single sentence decided a person's fate. His gaze turned to the two who stood proudly. As for you, Gong Yimo, her large, clear, and bright eyes looked towards Gong Sheng. Killing in the imperial presence is a capital offense. Leading people to trespass into a forbidden palace is also a capital offense. You have anything to say? Gong Yimo was seen raising her head to face the emperor directly, a smile on her face. Imperial father, your words are mistaken. Imperial father's prestige is renowned, and her martial arts are #1 in the world. As imperial father's daughter, when foreign enemies invaded, I neither acted weak nor did I flee. I beheaded the opponent. What crime is there in that? As for calling people to force their way into the rear palace, before she could finish, she spat out a mouthful of fresh, blood. Her body went limp, and she knelt on the ground, using her sword to support herself, and barely remained steady. A moment later, she looked up again and smiled. Someone was killing your son right under your nose, treating the imperial authority as nothing. Your daughter could not bear to see imperial father deceived by treacherous people and risk death to seek an audience. What crime is there in that? Gong Sheng was so amused by her sharp tongue that he laughed, speaking with great interest. If that's the case, then what do you think I should do? Your subject believes imperial father should reward me. She was gambling again, gambling that Gong Sheng had just killed the chicken to scare the monkeys, and was on her side. Before Gong Sheng could speak, the empress at the side couldn't hold back. This is simply sophistry. Your Majesty, if you truly let her go, where's the royal law? How will you command respect through the law in the future? Gong Yimo's large eyes sparkled as she looked at Gong Sheng. Imperial father, you are the royal law. As the supreme existence in the dynasty, the royal law you established was meant to restrain others. This speech could be said to have used up all the flattery Gong Yimo had in her entire life. Gong Sheng felt that such a lively and intelligent child was truly impossible to say no to. After a long silence, Gong Sheng suddenly burst out laughing. I will reward whomever I wish to reward. With a great wave of his hand, pass on my decree. Bestow upon the 7th princess the title of Princess Xiaoyang, and grant her Wuji Hall. Grant the 9th prince Tia Hall, and let them move out of the cold palace. Chang, she gasped inwardly. This Wuji Hall was where the emperor lived when he was a prince, and he actually bestowed it upon the 7th princess. Because Gong Sheng had been laughing so happily just now, no one dared to show their face at this moment after he issued the decree. Hearing the emperor's decree, Gong Yimo let out a huge sigh of relief. Her vision went black, and she fainted on the spot. She had been holding on by a sheer thread of will. Now that she had won, she could no longer hold on. Imperial sister. Gong Ju's anxious cry came from behind. Gong Yimo struggled to open her eyelids and comforted Gong Ju. Don't be afraid, I'm fine. After speaking, her hand dropped directly to the ground. She had fainted completely. Gong Ju half-held her, tears streaming down his face. When facing over 1,000 imperial guards, he didn't cry. When facing his own imperial father's cold indifference, he didn't cry. When facing the insults and ridicule of others, he didn't cry. But when the only woman who stood protectively in front of him collapsed, he could no longer hold it in. At this moment, Gong Ju was like a fragile and helpless child. This person was his everything. The most satisfying part of the novel was none other than when the male lead deceived the second female lead, and in the end, teamed up with the female lead to frame her. After the second female lead is reborn, the male lead pursues her but cannot have her. Crown Prince Gong Che is this kind of person. In the palace, Gong Ju, Gong Sheng, and the imperial physician all gathered around, looking at the bloody wounds on the girl's body. Gong Sheng was secretly alarmed. This child was even more formidable than her mother was back then. Just a little girl, yet she was even stronger than himself. What a pity she is not my own flesh and blood. Gong Sheng secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she is a girl. At this moment, in the Empress's palace, a series of crashing sounds of porcelain breaking could be heard. She was unwilling. It was one thing for that bastard's mother to win the Emperor's favor, but why could a bastard like her also receive His Majesty's favoritism? Princess Xiaoyang. On what grounds is a bastard like her called Princess Xiaoyang, while her own legitimate daughter can only be called Qinza? At this moment, the Empress's face was filled with ferocity, and she had smashed everything that could be smashed. Imperial Mother, why are you so angry? The Crown Prince saw the mess on the floor as soon as he entered. The 14-year-old Gong Che had a pair of very gentle eyes. He waved his hand at the servants. All of you leave. I will take care of Imperial Mother. The young palace maids quickly retreated with gratitude. Usually, when a master was angry, it was the servants like them who suffered. Seeing her son, the Empress's expression returned to normal. She beckoned Gong Che to come closer. Looking at Gong Che's increasingly handsome face, she couldn't understand. Her Che-er was gentle and knowledgeable, and the court was full of praise for him. How could His Majesty ignore such an outstanding son and instead favor that bastard Gong Yimo? Just now, Gong Che had witnessed everything before coming in. He asked in a warm voice, Imperial Mother, are you angry because of ninth brother? The Empress snorted coldly. Imperial Mother is angry at that bastard. On what grounds does she monopolize the imperial favor? After speaking, the Empress realized she had almost misspoken. Currently, no more than 5 people in the palace knew that Gong Yimo was not His Majesty's biological child. If His Majesty found out someone had leaked the secret, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Empress changed the subject, saying he had misheard. Gong Che didn't think much of it either. However, his Imperial Mother's words made him think of that person, that proudly standing figure. He couldn't help but be slightly lost in thought. He had seen so many daughters from noble families, gentle and elegant, or innocent and lovely, but he had never imagined someone would appear before him so forcefully. Not only did his cold and ruthless ninth brother like her, but even his cold-hearted and aloof imperial father liked her. He was becoming more and more interested in this imperial sister of his. The thought was just a fleeting one. He gently comforted the Empress for a few sentences, coaxing her to laugh before leaving. Inside Taiji Hall, I asked there any news. Suddenly hearing the Crown Prince's question, Xiao Qiao was slightly stunned. After a long while, he finally spoke. Reporting to Your Highness the Crown Prince, I heard that Princess Zhuang's injuries are very serious, and they are all external wounds. I'm afraid there won't be any news for the next day or two. When the Crown Prince heard this, he thought, how could they all be on his imperial sister? When he returned, he would send over that bottle of jade face powder for promoting muscle growth and removing scars. It's a big deal for a girl to have scars on her body. Do you think every transmigrated female lead has a protagonist halo? Gong Yimo, just because she clung to the wrong thigh, ended up as a wandering soul, reborn into a new life. She didn't expect that the enemy who personally killed her in her previous life would, in this life, become the legendary possessive and Yandere younger brother who is obsessed with his sister. Taiji Hall. Gong Yimo had been unconscious for a full 10 days. Gong Ju had also been taking care of her without undressing for 10 days. This morning, the golden rays of the sun sprinkled on Gong Yimo's delicate little face. She slowly opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw the shockingly thin Gong Ju. She reached out her jade-like hand, wanting to touch his head. The moment her hand touched him, Gong Ju opened his pair of slightly weary phoenix eyes. Seeing his imperial sister awake, a hint of moisture appeared in Gong Ju's phoenix eyes. He grabbed Gong Yimo's small hand, his voice hoarse yet filled with pleasant surprise. Imperial sister, you're finally awake. I was so afraid you would just leave me like this and never come back. Gong Yimo reached out and pinched Gong Ju's handsome face. What nonsense are you talking about? How could I possibly leave you? You brat, quickly get me something to eat. Not eating for so many days has made me terribly hungry. As soon as she finished speaking, Gong Ju turned and quickly ordered someone to serve a meal. At this moment, the table was already filled with exquisite delicacies. Gong Yimo, without a second word, devoured everything like a whirlwind. After eating and drinking her fill, she didn't forget to sigh with emotion. Now this is life. Compared to this, what was that stuff we ate in the cold palace? Gong Yimo was stared at from the side, feeling inexplicably puzzled. Looking at Gong Ju's bowl, which was still full of food, she asked curiously, You brat, why aren't you eating? Didn't I tell you to eat more? Children need to eat more to be cute. As she spoke, she frantically started feeding Gong Ju with the food. At this moment, Gong Ju's heart was as sweet as could be. As long as he could be with his imperial sister, he was content. Even if the delicacies here were the best, in his heart, they couldn't compare to that chicken leg back then. Looking at his imperial sister's lively smile, it seemed that for imperial sister, as long as she could eat and sleep, this world doesn't have that many problems. After the meal, Gong Ju had to go to the Imperial Academy for classes. Before leaving, he didn't forget to repeatedly remind Gong Yimo to take good care of herself. He annoyed Gong Yimo so much that she pushed him out the door. Just as Gong Ju left, she heard Exiner say that the Crown Prince was coming over. Gong Yimo's feelings were very complicated. In her past life, she could have given her life for this man. In this life, she was not the Gong Yimo of the past, and Gong Che was not the him of her previous life. How should she face him? With harsh words? There was no need for her to make an enemy of him. But as for forgiving him, Gong Yimo couldn't do that either. That would be too stifling. After thinking it over, Gong Yimo felt that the only path was to cling to the powerful. Anyway, they were enemies in the previous life, so she would just handle it the same way she handled Gong Ju. Before long, a eunuch's sharp announcement came from outside Taiji Hall. The crown prince has arrived. Before the crown prince could walk in, Gong Yimo ran out to greet him with a wide smile. When Gong Yimo from the cold palace learned that her husband from her previous life was coming to see her, she suppressed the discomfort in her heart and decided to firmly cling to her previous life's husband's thigh in this life. Watching Gong Yimo rush out to greet him, Gong Che was stunned. She had inherited her mother's snow-white skin. Between her bright eyes and pearly teeth, she was unspeakably sweet and cute. Gong Ju secretly thought, I can't believe she was the one who killed in the imperial presence that night. She was about to greet Gong Che, but was stopped by him. Gong Yimo smiled brightly at Gong Che. Crown Prince brother, you're so handsome. You're the most handsome person I've ever seen. Gong Che was taken aback by Gong Yimo's directness and sighed lightly that a girl should be reserved. You can't praise others so easily, especially boys. Thinking of her deadly possessiveness towards Gong Che in her past life, a demonic smile appeared and an unnatural look flashed across her face for a moment. Reserved? If only she had understood that principle in her past life, then he wouldn't have turned to like that helpless and reserved. Su Miaoran. Her face darkened as she summed up her mistakes from her past life, completely oblivious to her own facial expression. Gong Che saw Gong Yimo's expression darken and knew he had misspoken. Yimo grew up in the cold palace. Saying she wasn't reserved, wasn't that indirectly saying she had no upbringing? He realized his mistake and quickly tried to remedy it. You are my sister. It's all right to be like this with me, but you can't be like this with outsiders. Gong Yimo, like a little girl who had not yet seen the world, nodded repeatedly, I'll remember, Crown Prince brother. And at this moment, on the other side, little Gong Ju was still at the academy, completely unaware that his imperial sister was being targeted by a big bad wolf. A leaf fell onto Gong Ju's head. He picked up the leaf and examined it carefully. Why does this leaf look particularly green? At this moment, inside Taiji Hall, Gong Che handed the jade face powder to Gong Yimo. This jade face powder was extremely precious. Gong Che's position as crown prince was not easy either. For him to give such a precious thing to her, it seemed he really doted on her as a sister. Thinking this, she hurriedly said goodbye to Gong Che and ran to the inner hall to apply the medicine. An hour later, a gentle breeze blew. Gong Yimo was sleeping very soundly. Suddenly, a figure quietly approached her. Just as Gong Yimo was about to strike, her wrist was grabbed by a large hand. As soon as Gong Ju returned, he asked about Gong Che's visit. This kid's news travels fast, doesn't it? She said with a smile. Crown Prince brother came to bring me an umbrella. He's not so bad. At this moment, Gong Ju had automatically ignored the first half of the sentence. In his mind, there was only his imperial sister's crown prince brother. He pushed Gong Yimo onto the bed. Imperial sister's wounds have long since healed. Imperial father's medicine would never leave a scar. Why did imperial sister accept imperial brother's medicine? So you're jealous? The roles were reversed. Gong Ju became the one being teased, and a blush instantly spread across his handsome face. As she spoke, she handed the jade face powder to Gong Ju with a radiant smile. Of course I know. I'm not in a hurry, so I accepted it to use on you. Gong Ju, who was originally sulking, felt his heart melt after hearing Gong Yimo's words. So his imperial sister had been thinking of him all along. Only 3 bottles of this could be produced a year. Last time imperial sister was injured, imperial father used up 2 bottles. Imperial sister actually gave the last remaining bottle to him. The Yandra little brother's possessiveness grew stronger. He hugged Gong Yimo tightly, his kiss possessive. Imperial sister, you've always been thinking of me, right? A helpless smile appeared on Gong Yimo's pretty face that I knew you'd get hung up on this. What a little jealous pot. If I'm not thinking of you, who else would I be thinking of? Suddenly, Gong Yimo realized something and immediately reached out to pull off Gong Ju's clothes that I was so busy talking just now. I almost forgot to apply your medicine. Gong Ju became inexplicably nervous. He backed away a little, saying with difficulty, I'm imperial sister. My wounds are all healed. You don't need to. Before he could finish, Gong Yimo frowned impatiently. Look at you. Your face is so pale. Don't think I don't know your wounds haven't healed yet. As she spoke, Gong Ju slowly started to get up, wanting to slip away, but Gong Yimo grabbed his wrist. I don't trust anyone in this rear palace. You'd better listen to me obediently. Don't make me use force. It won't be pretty. Under his imperial sister's authority, Gongju could only comply obediently. He slowly took off his princely robe, dressed only in his black undergarments. His eyes were clear and his features handsome and spirited. He already had this peerless grace of his future self. This gave Gong Yimo a great feast for the eyes. This child is becoming more and more devilishly handsome. Seeing Gongju's slow pace of undressing, Gong Yimo couldn't hold back. Hurry up, my hands are getting sore. Gongju endured the heat on his face and took off his upper garment. Looking at the hateful scars on his body, a trace of heartache flashed in Gong Yimo's eyes. The child she had raised with her own hands had been hurt like this by those people. Gong Yimo's cool hand touched his shoulder, making him feel an inexplicable itch. His face burned uncontrollably. He grabbed Gong Yimo's hand as she was about to reach over again. He didn't know why, but in Imperial Sister's heart, he wasn't a younger brother, but more like a junior of hers. So she never cared about these jealous feelings. But he cared. A hint of indescribable frustration welled up in his heart. Imperial Sister, you're really going to be the death of me. At this moment, Gong Yimo had no idea that she had been running in Gongju's heart for a long time. Those people who hurt you are so annoying. It's all my fault for not protecting you well. That's why you've suffered so much. Her small mouth pouted slightly, looking unspeakably cute. Imperial Sister, don't be angry. Let me tell you something happy. The Grand Tutor praised me today. He said my perspective on issues is unconventional. Seeing Gong Yimo's, I knew it, expression, what's so strange about that? The child I raised is naturally extraordinary. Gongju rubbed his head, his face full of question marks. What's wrong with Imperial Sister today? He was praised by the Grand Tutor. Why isn't she happy? Gong Yimo looked at Gongju with a worried expression. Have you forgotten everything I told you? Before our wings are fully grown, we must hide our talents and not leave too much of an impression on others. You want to show off just for someone's praise. Are you trying to anger me to death? Gongju saw that his Imperial Sister was on the verge of exploding and quickly explained, Imperial Sister, don't be angry. I usually do as you say, neither standing out nor falling behind. This time was really an accident. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo didn't listen to his explanation at all and punched him. They couldn't protect themselves yet. If this kid showed off his talents, they would be in a lot of trouble. This brat is really going to be the death of me. The man leaned close to his Imperial Sister, his hand gently caressing her face. He smiled and said, indeed more beautiful than the crimson blood beauty in my palace. Old Ninth hurriedly left this place of trouble. After all, an ordinary person couldn't handle this. Old Sixth was not happy and angrily cursed him for being a useless old Ninth. He retorted that ugly people cause more trouble. Then I won't stay here and provoke Imperial Brother. Old Six flew into a rage, grabbed him by the collar, and called him a pretty boy who relies on his looks to get by, a kept man. He also said that his sweetheart, Xiao Mo, would abandon him without a second thought when he grew old and lost his looks. Handsome Old Ninth was in disbelief, not believing his Imperial Sister would abandon him. Old Ninth was terrified. He pushed Old Sixth away and hurried to find Consort Xian for confirmation. Arriving at Consort Xian's palace, Old Sixth bowed and then explained his purpose to Consort Xian. Sixth Imperial Brother said some inexplicable things to me. I am very confused and have come here specifically to ask. Consort Xian, getting her wish, secretly rejoiced. She had finally gotten a hold on the handsome boy. Old Ninth asked, why is it that Imperial Sister and I have such a deep bond, yet Imperial Brother insists that Imperial Sister will one day grow tired of me? Consort Xian revealed a shocking secret. The one who killed Yimo's mother back then was none other than your mother. Your mother is truly worthy of being well-read. Her methods were brilliant. She deliberately got close to Yimo's mother to gain her trust, yet she ruthlessly poisoned her behind her back. These words made Old Ninth stumble back into a chair in disbelief. Consort Xian said arrogantly, this is just a small matter, and your highness can't take it already? There are even more interesting things to come. Yimo's mother died at the hands of your mother. But do you know who killed your mother? The killer on the surface was me, but she was just a tool for the emperor. She then mercilessly mocked Old Ninth, saying he was acting out a deep love story with the son of his mother's killer. This tangled web of relationships broke Old Ninth's heart. He knew he had no face to see the white moonlight in his heart again. But on the other side, Xiao Mo was completely unaware. She had prepared Gongju's favorite meat patties and was eagerly waiting for him to return. Gongju was suffering from inner turmoil, not knowing how to face all this. Gongju hadn't gone to the cold palace to find Xiao Mo for several days. Xiao Mo was worried that the emperor had run into some trouble. Then came the bad news that Gongju had been scolded by the emperor. This shocked Xiao Mo. How dare he anger imperial father? Xiao Mo rushed over upon hearing the news, ready to protect her younger brother. As she entered, she planned to stage a beauty's honey trap, but unexpectedly, imperial father was furious. Old Ninth, as an older brother, not only disrespected imperial father, but also heavily injured his younger brother. Xiao Mo, with an unshakable presence, protectively shielded her younger brother behind her. Then she began her coquettish routine, hugging imperial father's arm and admitting fault in a soft, gentle voice. She begged imperial father to calm down, then pretended to fiercely question Old Ninth, asking for the cause and effect of the matter. Only after understanding did she learn that the 14th prince had been instigated by someone to slander Xiao Mo and Old Ninth, claiming their relationship was ambiguous and incestuous. Handsome Old Ninth couldn't take it and beat up the 14th prince. Xiao Mo was utterly shocked. How could someone's thoughts be so filthy? The person who designed this was extremely vicious, wanting to take her life and use the 14th brother as a cannon fodder, just to frame her and Gongju. She calmed down and decided to strike back hard at the mastermind. Xiao Mo decided that if she could solve the problem with the emperor, everything else would be fine. Immediately, Xiao Mo got into character and started pouring out her grievances to the emperor. She recalled the scenes of her struggling and being bullied in the cold palace since birth. She immediately put herself in that situation. In the cold palace, Gongju was the only one who cared about her. For so many years, he was the only one who was good to me. It wasn't until later, when she accidentally learned martial arts, that she gained the ability to protect herself. For so many years, Gongju was not just a younger brother and a relative, but more, like a friend and a confidant. In times of difficulty, the two of them protected each other. Does imperial father still want to put us in a pig cage? Faced with this questioning, the emperor knew he was in the wrong. Looking at the speechless emperor, Yimo finally picked up the wooden carving of herself that Old Ninth had made, claiming it was a birthday gift from him. This pure friendship was actually misinterpreted by someone with ulterior motives. Then she questioned the emperor, who was the person who threw me into the cold palace and caused my mother's death. For so many years, the only one who has been good to me is Gongju. Never mind hitting someone, even if he killed someone, I would stand by his side. Gong Yimo once again shielded her little puppy brother behind her, confronting her own imperial father. If imperial father still has any doubts, then send me to the cold palace. Only Gongju is still young. I hope imperial father can be merciful and let him stay. She had practiced this whole speech to perfection. Since ancient times, heroes have had a weakness for beauties. The emperor was indeed stunned by this fierce operation, seeing that Gong Yimo and Old Ninth rise and fall together, and have depended on each other since childhood. He let them off the hook. The emperor had to give himself a way out, saying he was only angry about the younger prince being injured, and that suspicion was out of the question. Gong Yimo struck while the iron was hot, begging the emperor to let Old Ninth off the hook. The emperor was still hesitating. She directly stepped forward, a beauty saving the hero, wanting to take all the blame herself. The emperor, to save face, granted her wish and ordered her to kneel at the entrance for 3 hours. Gong Yimo knelt down with a thud. The man also knelt down beside her. This made her very angry. Right now, we are the center of attention, with countless people watching us. Your kneeling will only give those with ulterior motives another opportunity to cause trouble. But Gongju just wanted to be with her. As a result, before he could finish speaking, he collapsed. It turned out that handsome Old Ninth had a high fever. This made Gong Yimo furious. After feeding him fever-reducing medicine, she berated the Imperial Medical Academy for treating a prince this way. The imperial physician personally attended to him. Gong Yimo learned that Old Ninth was poisoned. Back in Taiji Hall, Gong Yimo flew into a rage, ordering Old Ninth to kneel. He was poisoned and didn't even tell her. Gongju explained that was nothing serious, just a little poison. She was shocked, saying he had been hit with an aphrodisiac. To be poisoned like this by a palace maid at such a young age. And Gongju had caught a cold and fever from soaking in cold water to suppress the aphrodisiac. Gong Yimo said since The palace maid wanted you. Why didn't you just grant her wish? Why torture yourself? Gongju's heart was broken. He said he was a great romantic who would only marry one person in his life. Gong Yimo was at a loss for words. She finally understood that she had been treating little Ju too much like a child. If your white moonlight had a high fever, what would you do? Gong Yimo took the opportunity to ask Gongju why he hadn't come to see her these past few days. Gongju remained silent. He couldn't say that he and his imperial sister had a feud over their mother's deaths. The little follower sold him out, saying he had gone to Consort Xian's place. Gong Yimo scolded him, saying that old hag's words couldn't be trusted. She then drew her sword and taught Gongju a lesson. Forced, Gongju told her the whole story. Gong Yimo already knew this in her heart, which was why she decided to take Gongju in. Being kind, she didn't hold a grudge and only hoped Gongju would stay by her side. Gongju was deeply moved and swore that his imperial sister would always be his most precious person. Gong Yimo also said that even if Gongju put poison in her mouth, she would drink it. But she didn't believe Gongju would do that. This deep affection is truly rare. The two embraced and wept. In the heat of the moment, Gong Yimo didn't forget to force a confession from Gongju. She asked about the wooden figurine. Gongju's face turned red, and he fled in embarrassment. Gongju stood alone under the moon, thinking about being bewitched that night, not knowing how to bring it up with Gong Yimo. The man's whole body was hot, about to show his true skills. A seductive woman in tattered clothes walked in. She wanted to make Gongju commit a crime. She kept trying to seduce him. Gongju looked troubled. With a shout of "Get out!" the woman was driven from the room. She was about to cry out in pain when Gongju ran out of the room, the medicine going to his head. His mind was filled with the palace maid, as if he was about to go crazy. He fantasized about Gong Yimo's slender body. He plunged his head into ice water to calm himself down. And so, that strange little wooden man came to be. In this palace sat the supreme man, yet a minister questioned him to his face. The reason was that Gong Yimo actually bathed with a group of men, who let the emperor dote on her. And with Gongju's support, when the minister proposed taking back the Western military forces, Gongju stood up for her. Only then was Gong Yimo able to offer advice to the royal family. The emperor thought of Gong Yimo's contributions and, in a happy mood, said, "Reward her." The ministers were stunned. Gong Yimo is the maternal granddaughter of the king who guards the West. The king who guards the West misses her very much, but he's being watched by the ministers. Gong Yimo's first time in the imperial court was met with opposition from all the officials. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo directly took up a brush and let them see what modern technology was. Looking at the strange pool drawn on the diagram, she showed the finished drawing to Gong Sheng and explained it in detail. As she spoke, she had easily solved this problem that no one else could. Gong Sheng dotingly stroked Gong Yimo's head and directly rewarded her heavily. She threw her arms around Gong Sheng and said with a smile, "If Imperial Father truly wants to reward me, why not let me be an Imperial Commissioner for once and personally supervise the construction? If I hand my plan over to those fools, I'm afraid they'll mess it up." He wasn't at ease either, but Gong Sheng cruelly refused. Having just been reunited with his daughter, how could he bear to let her go to that cold northern land to suffer? But Gong Sheng had no idea his answer was already part of someone's calculations. Gong Yimo acted helpless and said, "Then why not send Gongju? Everything I know, he knows too." Just like that, the two of them had arranged everything for Gongju without even asking his opinion. Before his departure, Gong Yimo personally packed his bags for him, wishing she could stuff all the good things in for him. Gong Yimo gave her golden silk soft armor to Gongju and continued to nag him with a long list of instructions. Her watery, large eyes were already overflowing with tears. This time, neither of them knew when they would see each other again. She looked at the young man she had raised, who had now grown up to be handsome and elegant. After this long journey, he might even have a wife when he returns. The more Gong Yimo spoke, the more dejected she became. Gongju saw his imperial sister's low spirits and cupped her small face with both hands, his eyes filled with a tenderness that could drown you. "I will follow soon. because you are here. In the past, it was always Imperial Sister who protected him. This time, it was his turn to protect Imperial Sister, to stand in front of her and shield her from all storms. Gong Yimo felt very uncomfortable being looked at by him. She was clearly the elder. Why was she being stared at by this little brat? And feeling like she was being doted on? This must be an illusion. She flusteredly slapped Gong Ju's hands away and continued to pack for him. Watching his Imperial Sister rummaging around, the corners of Gong Ju's lips curved up. He really didn't want to leave his Imperial Sister for even a moment. After a while, Gong Yimo found a book and handed it to Gong Ju. Seeing the illustrations inside, Gong Ju was completely taken aback. On second thought, could Imperial Sister be hinting at something? Before he could think too much, Gong Yimo directly explained. It turned out that this book was something Gong Yimo used to teach herself about the affairs between men and women. Like a mother worrying about her child, she earnestly advised, don't grow up too fast. In a few more years, you'll be at the age to marry. When you're out there for these few years, you must conduct yourself with integrity, especially with girls. Don't come back with a child after just a few years. From the first sentence she spoke, Gong Ju felt that something was increasingly wrong. In the end, his face darkened as he said, that won't happen. It's absolutely impossible for me to have another woman, let alone a child. Why is it impossible? As long as you kiss a girl, she'll get pregnant. This lady would like to say, Sister Yimo, you're the one who should be reading this book the most. The book says that kissing is the most direct way for humans to express emotion. It belongs to that momentary heartbeat. When Gong Ju kissed those lips he had long coveted, time seemed to stop. They could hear each other's thunderous heartbeats. From a light touch to a gradual deepening, it felt like a century had passed. Only then did Gong Ju slowly pull back, like this. His voice still carried a trace of lingering passion as he asked in a hoarse voice. Gong Yimo hadn't reacted yet. She had just been kissed by the child she had raised since he was small. Gong Ju's handsome face was already tinged with a faint blush, his eyes incomparably innocent. I asked it like this. Imperial Sister, if kissing Imperial Sister could lead to having a child, that would be great. Gong Yimo was stunned for a long while. After a moment, she finally spoke, of course. Not only that, you also have to sleep in the same bed, and then it will happen naturally. In short, you must conduct yourself with integrity when you're outside. Also, that action you just did, you're not allowed to do it with anyone else. No one. At this moment, Gong Yimo still didn't know that her feelings for Gong Ju were already mixed with something called possessiveness. Her flustered appearance only made Gong Ju more eager. He gave her a deep look and replied in a low voice, I know, Imperial Sister. But Gong Yimo was completely stunned by his gaze. The next day, Gong Che arrived early at Taiji Hall with a brocade box. Gong Yimo informed him that Gong Ju was packing in his own chambers today and wasn't here. Coincidentally, she also had something to give him, so they went over together. Looking at the exquisitely wrapped brocade box in Gong Ju's hands, Gong Yimo asked curiously, Crown Prince Brother, what did you bring? Gong Che satisfied her curiosity and opened the box. Inside lay a dagger inlaid with gems and pearls. Gong Yimo sincerely praised, Gong Ju will definitely like it. Such a valuable item could surely be sold for a lot of money. If Gong Che knew what was going through Gong Yimo's mind at that moment, would he be angry enough to spit blood? Halfway there, Gong Yimo suddenly stopped. She was holding a lotus flower. At this moment, Gong Yimo was so lively and vivacious, so delicate and refined. The hem of her skirt fluttered in the wind like a butterfly fairy. Gong Che couldn't help but stare. A smile from her could topple a city. It must be so. As soon as they arrived at Gong Ju's chambers, a young palace maid said that the 9th prince had gone to choose a warhorse for his journey. Since Gong Ju wasn't here, why not take this opportunity to curry favor with Gong Che? She looked at Gong Che with her big, bright eyes. I asked Crown Prince Brother in a hurry to go back. I don't know if Crown Prince Brother would be willing. It would be a shame to go back just like this after finally coming out. Gong Che smiled gently. It's not impossible. With flowers and water, how can there be no wine? As he spoke, he ordered Exener to fetch his private collection of aged wine for Crown Prince Brother to taste. On the other side, little Gong Ju, who was out walking his horse, had no idea his Imperial Sister was working hard to curry favor with someone else. A gust of wind blew, and a large, green leaf fell straight towards Gong Ju. Why is it still that green leaf? It's so green, it's practically dripping oil. This is the most speechless female lead I've ever seen, actually borrowing troops from her ex-husband to save her current little lover. Gong Ge said that as long as it was something she wanted, he would agree to anything. It was clearly she who invited him for a boat ride on the lake, but she was thinking about his emperor like this. It seems this boat ride can't continue. At this moment, a dark cloud pressed down in the sky. He was just about to say to bring the boat to shore when a sharp pain shot through his chest. His face changed dramatically, and with a thud, he collapsed onto the ground. This scene was all too familiar. Gong Yimo suddenly woke up. A prince with a physical ailment could never become the crown prince. To protect his position as crown prince, all who knew his secret had to die. At this very moment, Gong Che had already developed the intent to kill Gong Yimo. With a swish, a small hidden weapon appeared in his palm. He had to kill her in the time it took for the boat to sway out of the lotus pond. Just as Gong Che was about to strike, Gong Yimo's small hand rested on his. She spoke in a warm voice. "Crown Prince brother, I will save you. Because of my cultivation technique, I've long since Crown Prince brother's secret. I haven't told anyone about this, including Gong Ju." After speaking, she helped Gong Che lie down. Her hands sent out a continuous stream of internal energy, pressing on his chest, hoping to make him feel better. At this moment, Gong Yimo's expression was focused, and faint beads of sweat had already appeared on her pretty little face. She was gambling, hoping that Gong Che, for the sake of their recent time together, would not kill her. Clearly, she won the bet. In the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it. By now, the boat had docked. Gong Che was helped off the boat by Gong Yimo. Watching the two slowly leave, Gong Yimo wiped the non-existent cold sweat from her forehead. Thank goodness she reacted quickly. Otherwise, she would have lost her life on that little boat today. Unbeknownst to her, Gong Ju was standing behind her in a white robe. For some reason, Gong Yimo felt that something was off about Gong Ju at this moment. Before Gong Yimo could speak, Gong Ju grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. His phoenix eyes were deep as he looked at her. "I don't see the crown prince alone again." The roles had now been reversed. Gong Yimo was like a little wife, having her head rubbed by Gong Ju. This little rascal is getting too bold. Is rubbing someone's head an act one can do to their own sister? Before Gong Yimo could complain, Gong Ju hugged her tightly. He just wanted his imperial sister to be happy, not like now, where imperial sister had to worry about everything for him, plotting every step. At this moment, how Gong Ju wished he could hold her tightly in his arms, kiss her, and merge her entire being into his own bones and blood. Soon, it was the day for Gong Ju to go to Shizhou for disaster relief. A man in black, the leader, looked at the vast procession and thought it didn't match the information he had received. Originally, they planned to intercept the disaster relief as soon as Gong Ju left the city gates. But with so many supplies now, he had to doubt the reliability of his information. Before he could figure it out, one of the Crown Prince's men gave an order to ensure all supplies safely left the territory. The leader in black stroked his beard and fell into deep thought. Although he didn't know why the Crown Prince would help the Ninth Prince, the Crown Prince's action revealed one thing. Of the 3 routes, 2 were traps. He ordered his men to check the wheel tracks. The ruts couldn't lie. Those barbarians in Shizhou, some rotten rice and old grain would be enough. I hope you will appreciate this great gift I'm sending to the Ninth Prince. Oh my God, is this the legendary? I see you as a brother, but you want to be my man? At this moment, Gong Ju's convoy had just reached Shirley Pavilion when he saw Gong Yimo already sitting in the pavilion, waiting. The originally dejected young man immediately became high-spirited. Riding a white horse, he galloped towards Gong Yimo. His figure was just like Prince Charming from a fairy tale. With Imperial Sister's plan this time, everything went smoothly. I've already tied something to the carriage's crossbeam, and all the wheel tracks have been cleared. After speaking, Gong Ju toasted Gong Yimo with 3 cups of wine. This first cup is to thank Imperial Sister for all the strategies you've devised for me over the years. Thank you, Imperial Sister, for giving me a new life. This second cup, over these years, I have been a great burden to Imperial Sister. I had nothing, yet Imperial Sister was willing to give her all for me. Thank you, Imperial Sister, for not abandoning me. This third cup of wine is still for Imperial Sister. He had imagined countless times what he would be like without her in the Cold Palace. He would surely be cruel, twisted, and violent. This world would also surely be lonely and hopeless. So this third cup of wine, he toasts to Imperial Sister's existence in his life. He spoke the last sentence with a sense of longing, his tone filled with so many emotions. At this moment, Gongju had already put down his wine cup and walked in front of her, looking as if he was about to embrace her. Gong Yimo's little heart thumped, anticipating the young man's move. But Gongju did not take another step. The young man was seen picking up a lock of her hair, gently shattering it with his internal energy, and whispering in her ear in a deep and firm voice, "Momo, wait for me to come back." Gong Yimo touched her hair, a look of slight astonishment in her eyes, as if she hadn't yet returned to her senses. On horseback, a bitter smile touched the young man's lips as he waved goodbye. His girl would never know how painful parting was for him. His eyes full of longing, he gently kissed the lock of hair, then solemnly placed it over his chest. Legend has it that this is the place closest to the heart. If a person places their most precious thing in the position closest to their heart, it means that person or thing is extremely important to them. The army set off on its grand journey. Gong Yimo watched the young man's departing figure, a faint sorrow in her eyes. Who knows when they will meet again after this departure? They had just parted, and she already seemed to miss him very much. At the same time, in Jiayang Hall, Gongsheng was in a furious rage. The reason was that the Empress's father, the current right prime minister, had been corrupt and had framed the fourth prince. The left prime minister and the right prime minister had always been at odds. This time, he finally had leverage against the right prime minister and quickly added fuel to the fire. Once he used this opportunity to bring down the Empress and the right prime minister, then this imperial court would be his to rule. All the ministers submitted memorials requesting the deposition of the Empress. The right prime minister sat in his place, seeming to have aged 10 years in an instant. It seemed their Liu family was doomed this time. After all, he had finally moved against the Empress's maternal family. Just as everyone was gloating, thinking the Liu family was about to fall, Crown Prince Gongche presented a confession, taking all the blame upon himself. Over here, Gong Yimo was still secretly grieving over Gong Ju's departure. "Princess Xiaoyang," an anxious female voice came from behind. The Empress actually knelt directly before Gong Yimo, tearfully begging her to save Gongche. Gong Yimo was not a person of iron and stone, but she was not Imperial Father's biological child. How much weight would her words carry before the Emperor? Seeing the Empress about to kowtow again, Gong Yimo sighed helplessly and agreed. Hearing this, the Empress's eyes were filled with determination. As long as the princess agrees to do her best, I will immediately take poison and kill myself. I implore the princess to give it her all. Gong Yimo didn't expect the Empress's life. She told the Empress that if this matter was successful, she must agree to one condition of hers. Thinking of her white-haired father, the Empress gritted her teeth and agreed. At this moment, inside Jiayang Hall, the ministers were pressuring Gong Sheng to depose the Empress and appoint a new crown prince. Gong Che faced the impending outcome without any fear or panic. Instead, Gong Yimo's voice echoed in his mind that I'm afraid I won't escape death today. If she were here, would she worry for me? Why is it so noisy? I could hear it from a long way off. A clear, cheerful laugh came from the entrance. Hearing Gong Yimo's voice, Gong Che's expression changed. Why would she come at a time like this? Moer, this is the Imperial Court. You're not to cause trouble. At this moment, Gong Sheng's tone was somewhat stern. Gong Yimo strode in and said seriously, Imperial Father, your daughter is not causing trouble. Your daughter is here to file a complaint. As she spoke, she leaned directly against Gong Sheng, her expression turning angry. Imperial Father, it was the right Prime Minister. He framed Gong Ju. If it weren't for Crown Prince Brother's selfless help, Gong Ju probably wouldn't have even made it out of the city gates. A single stone stirs 1,000 waves. The situation gradually began to reverse. The Empress, because she failed to restrain her father, wanted to atone with her death. Fortunately, your daughter arrived in time and saved Imperial Mother. Crown Prince Brother was even willing to take the blame for you to protect the Empress's dignity. Are you really going to harm both mother and son? After hearing Gong Yimo's words, the right Prime Minister's eyes were resolute. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his gaze was incredibly firm, filled with a certain resolve. The princess is indeed exceptionally intelligent. He is willing to take all the blame, hoping that this Princess Xiaoyang can save his daughter. My maternal grandfather, "Your Highness, it was the outer palace that wronged you and harmed your mother." As he spoke, he quickly got up and slammed his head against a dragon pillar. Instantly, blood flowed like a stream. The scene was in an uproar. Gong Yimo closed her eyes, not wanting to see this bloody scene. And Gong Che was completely stunned, his eyes staring blankly at the old figure in front of him. He only knew that his maternal grandfather, who had advised, taught, and doted on him, was no more. The Prime Minister slammed his head against the pillar. By the time the eunuch ran to check, the Prime Minister was already dead. Hearing the news, the Crown Prince fell to his knees with a thud. The Emperor and Gong Yimo also did not expect this to happen. A minister at the side saw this and began to fan the flames. He insisted that the right Prime Minister had committed suicide out of guilt and had crashed into the pillar to protect the Crown Prince and the Liu family. Gong Yimo was already heartbroken, and this minister was adding fuel to the fire. She had no choice but to quickly retort. She said that although the Liu family and others were accomplices, they had not succeeded in swapping the grain. Moreover, without the Crown Prince's help this time, she would not have thought of the plan to exit from 3 gates at once, successfully transporting the grain out of the capital. After speaking, she pleaded with the Emperor, requesting the Emperor to spare the Crown Prince and the Liu family. The Emperor was already getting a headache from their arguing. With a wave of his hand, he acknowledged that the Crown Prince had indeed performed a meritorious service, but the Liu family could not be spared and must be executed. The Emperor really cared about his pride. He said this was a matter of royal dignity and forbade the Crown Prince and Gong Yimo from pleading. He then ordered the guards to escort the Crown Prince back to his palace. Gong Yimo still didn't want to give up the slightest chance to plead. She believed that the Liu family's plot had not succeeded, and Prime Minister Liu had already atoned with his death. The remaining innocent Liu family members should not be executed. This prideful emperor started up again. He actually felt that he had spoiled Gong Yimo too much, leading her to now defy and question his decisions. What benefits did the Liu family give you that you dare to defy the emperor? This emperor was so angry that he was even taking it out on his innocent daughter. Gong Yimo felt terrible inside, but how could her strong-willed self admit defeat? She wanted to make a deal with the emperor. In the past 2 years, Gong Yimo had offered him countless plans. Gong Yimo wanted to use these merits to exchange for the safety of the Liu family. The emperor never expected his own daughter would say such a thing for the sake of the Liu family. He was furious and made Gong Yimo bear the Liu family's crime, demoting his own daughter to a commoner. Despite the crown prince's pleas, the emperor's mind was made up. A minister at the side saw this and smiled maliciously. How humiliating. After leaving the palace, Gong Yimo took all the money she had and went to the post station to inform the king who guards the west, telling him he must find a way to hide this from Gongju. If Gongju found out his beloved imperial sister had been demoted to a commoner, he would really do something reckless. As she turned around, Gong Yimo was knocked to the ground by someone on a horse. This man turned out to be the heir of Prince Ping. He saw that the person on the ground was the recently demoted Princess Zhaoyang and started speaking sarcastically. His news travels fast. Gong Yimo originally wanted to ask him for some money, but seeing the situation, she wisely held her tongue. Just as she was about to turn and leave, this heir was truly tactless. He insisted on provoking Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo took a look at him. Wasn't he the heir who was killed by his stepmother at the age of 18? Seeing that he was already 18, she decided not to bicker with him. But the heir wouldn't have it. He blocked Gong Yimo and cracked his whip, not letting her go. He was really asking for it. Gong Yimo had no choice but to deal with this annoying person. Have you ever seen a fallen princess with such agile skills? Gong Yimo was seen grabbing the incoming whip and with a backhand motion tying up the heir. She knocked him to the ground. Shitzi looked at Gong Yimo with his big, watery eyes. He wondered how there could be such a fierce woman in the world, and even threatened that he would make Gong Yimo pay. Gong Yimo clearly didn't take this little kid seriously, and even shook her head, lecturing him that his world was too narrow and that he should get out more to see things. He would then discover that a girl like her was, of course, one of a kind. Shitzi looked at Gong Yimo, who was so different from others, and actually started to blush. It seems Gong Yimo has charmed another little fanboy. Seeing the dazed Shitsi, Gong Yimo grabbed his ear and asked him why he was looking at her. With displeasure, Shitsi, his eyes welling up with tears and fear, quickly explained the whole story. It turned out that his sister Su was displeased with Gong Yimo, which was why he acted this way. But Gong Yimo didn't remember ever meeting this sister Su of his. It turned out this sister Su was the cherished daughter of Marquis Zhenghua Su, Miaolon. Just as Gong Yimo was marveling at how close the relationships between cousins were in ancient times, Shitsi shouted. Although Gong Yimo had never met his sister Su, she had taken the double-sided mirror that sister Su had spent a whole year embroidering as a gift for the crown prince. With just a single word from Gong Yimo saying she liked it, the crown prince gave it to her. When his cousin found out, she was heartbroken. Hearing this, Gong Yimo's expression changed drastically. She thought to herself that she had been deliberately avoiding him ever since her rebirth. So why was he still haunting her? However, Gong Yimo was magnanimous and didn't hold a grudge against the kid. She took the double-sided embroidery from her robes and tossed it to Shitsi. After untying him, she was about to turn and leave. Before she had taken a few steps, this infatuated Shitsi called out to Gong Yimo again, asking where she was going. Gong Yimo paused. That's right, the Duke couldn't know about her demotion, so she couldn't go to those shops. Where else could she go? This infatuated Shitsi suddenly became clever and shyly invited Gong Yimo to an unoccupied residence his family owned. Gong Yimo was taken aback. Shitsi quickly blushed and flusteredly explained that he just wanted to find someone to clean the place, telling her not to overthink it. Gong Yimo thought to herself that this Shitsi was quite interesting. He wanted to help her, but wouldn't say it outright. In that case, it would be better to accept his offer. Shitsi blushed and huffed, revealing his cute little canine teeth. He then led Gong Yimo towards the residence, not forgetting to remind her to follow him closely as they walked. Meanwhile, the Duke had already led his army to the border of Shizhou. A subordinate came to report that the route had been scouted and asked whether to advance. We're overjoyed. Amidst the yellow sand that filled the sky, the Duke took out the item Gong Yimo had left him. He wondered how his imperial sister was doing. The imperial palace was fraught with danger. Without him by her side, she had to take good care of herself. He still didn't know that Gong Yimo had been demoted to a commoner. Just then, in the sand-swept borderlands, a green leaf drifted down onto the Duke's head. The Duke picked it up and looked at it, feeling puzzled. Inside the Marquis Zhenghua's residence, Su Miaolon's mother was trying to persuade Su Miaolon not to like the crown prince, whose status had plummeted, and to consider Shitsi Shirye instead. Su Miaolon, however, said she knew what she was doing. Just as she said this, Shitsi came in. Su Miaolon immediately put on a girlish expression upon seeing Shitsi enter. Shitsi happily took out from his robes the double-sided embroidery for Su Miaolon. Su Miaolon's expression changed. Her sixth sense told her that Shitsi had already met Gong Yimo, so she tentatively asked Shitsi if he had met Gong Yimo. Hearing this, Shitsi started to show off, saying that he had traded an unused residence for this handkerchief from Gong Yimo. After hearing this, Su Miaolon came up with a plan and began to display her overflowing compassion. With ill intentions, she asked Shitsi to invite Gong Yimo to the afternoon tea party to relax. Shitsi, this straightforward guy, immediately praised his sister Su for being kind-hearted and even boasted that he would take care of it. In the blink of an eye, it was the afternoon. Gong Yimo was at the entrance of the Marquis Zhenghua's residence, hesitating whether to go in. The thought of Shitsi pleading with her like a spoiled child today to go to the tea party made her sigh. She decided to go and meet this sister Su. Just as she took a step forward, a guard blocked Gong Yimo. Where did this poor wretch come from? Get lost. This guard was truly audacious. Gong Yimo took a step back and let out. A warning, if you want to keep your job, you'd better let me in. Otherwise, I'll turn around and leave right now. We'll see who's unlucky in the end. Hearing this, the guard was at a loss. Just then, Su Miaolon's voice was heard. Who is it that is so ill-mannered as to offend Princess Xiaoyang? Su Miaolon said with a fake smile, "Please forgive my servant's ignorance." Don't blame him. Hearing these sarcastic words, Gong Yimo sneered and retorted, "Is it the servant who is ignorant, or the master?" After speaking, she headed into the courtyard. This infuriated Su Miaolon, the master of passive aggression. In the courtyard, the young ladies from various families saw that the newcomer was the demoted Gong Yimo and began to mock her sarcastically. I was wondering who was coming that would require Sister Su to greet them personally. Hearing these words, Su Miaolon started her act. It's nothing for me to suffer a little, but we can't be rude to Sister Gong. Gong Yimo had already sat down on a stool and asked about the tea for the tea party. Su Miaolon started her drama again, her eyes welling with tears, saying that her hospitality was lacking and that she would go prepare it now. A girl beside her couldn't stand it anymore and pointed her finger at Gong Yimo's nose and started scolding her. But Gong Yimo knew what was going on. It was Su Miaolon who had invited her to the tea party, yet she didn't prepare any tea and was using others as her weapon while she sighed on the side. The girl next to her still didn't understand the situation. Seeing that Su Miaolon was about to cry, she continued her verbal assault on Gong Yimo, telling Gong Yimo to kneel before everyone. This girl really didn't know what was good for her. Gong Yimo sneered, stood up, and asked her if she was sure she wanted her to kneel. Just then, the wind lifted the hem of Gong Yimo's skirt, revealing the jade pendant at her waist. This woman was forcing Gong Yimo to kneel, but she had no idea of Gong Yimo's capabilities. Gong Yimo was someone who had killed more than a dozen assassins in front of the emperor. For her, killing was a common occurrence. Gong Yimo took out a knife and played with it in her hand, asking the woman if she wanted to taste what it was like to be killed. The woman was so scared, she dropped her knees with a thud. Gong Yimo was inwardly delighted. She loved it when these people hated her, but couldn't do anything about it. Just then, a voice came from behind her. She is not qualified to make you kneel. But am I? It was the Grand Princess. Seeing the fallen Gong Yimo, the Grand Princess naturally wanted to take the opportunity to bully her, citing the reason that Gong Yimo, now a commoner, dared to disrespect imperial authority. She demanded that Gong Yimo kneel. Su Miaolon, seeing this, smiled smugly to herself, thinking it was a good thing she invited the Grand Princess to intimidate her. This time, Gong Yimo wouldn't be able to escape. But Gong Yimo was not one to be outdone. Now that she was down on her luck, the Grand Princess was using her power to bully her. Although the emperor had stripped her of her title, the emperor had once said that she had the right to not bow to anyone she met. She then retorted to the Grand Princess, "Did the emperor not even grant me this right?" Seeing Gong Yimo's imposing manner, the Grand Princess started to pick faults, be disheveled, and speak rudely in front of a princess. "I still have the right to punish you, don't I?" The Grand Princess was really asking for trouble. Gong Yimo gave the Grand Princess some face and replied, "That's natural." But even though she gave her this face, she didn't know if the Grand Princess could handle it. The Grand Princess immediately ordered everyone to strip Gong Yimo of her clothes and throw her out. The surrounding women who disliked Gong Yimo exchanged malicious glances and prepared to act. Gong Yimo, with an innocent look on her face, said, "Your Highness the Grand Princess, not only has your body been hollowed out by your male protagonist, but so has your brain." Hearing this, the Grand Princess flew into a rage out of shame and began to argue, frantically ordering her servants to kill Gong Yimo. The people beside her held the Grand Princess back, telling her not to be rash. Gong Yimo had killed people before, so everyone was a little afraid of her. Hearing what Gong Yimo said, the gossiping women around them started up again. How the tables have turned. They began to discuss the Grand Princess's male protagonist. Gong Yimo knew martial arts. What could the Grand Princess's servants do to her? The Grand Princess, trembling with anger, ordered the residence's guards to kill Gong Yimo. In an instant, Gong Yimo was surrounded by several large men. Just as they were about to draw their swords, Shitsi's voice was heard, "I'd like to see who dares to hurt her." With that, he stood in front of Gong Yimo, a hero saving the damsel. Shitsi's timing was perfect. Su Miaolon, the master of manipulation, saw her dear brother actually helping Gong Yimo and started to get jealous again, wanting to persuade Shitsi not to meddle. In this affair, Gong Yimo stepped forward and said to the Grand Princess, "If I encountered something like this, I would definitely hide first instead of being used as someone's weapon." The Grand Princess, having lost all face, raised her hand to slap Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo immediately took out the as-if-present Imperial Command token personally bestowed by the Emperor from her robes. Everyone was shocked and fell to their knees with a thud, chanting in unison, "Long live the Emperor." Seeing this, the Grand Princess collapsed to the ground. The Emperor had actually given the command token to Gong Yimo. But then again, what's the use of a princess who only knows how to keep male consorts? Gong Yimo didn't want her mood to be ruined by these people. She turned and asked Su Miaolon, "Didn't you insist on inviting me to the banquet? Where are the refreshments and the dishes?" After a long pause, Su Miaolon had no choice but to hobble off to prepare them. After that, Gong Yimo made plans with Shitzi to go to the Zue Gua guest house. This prince, who was on a campaign far away, heard that the princess he liked had been demoted to a commoner. He impulsively turned to get his horse and ride back. It turned out the Duke had already learned the news of his imperial sister's demotion, but he couldn't blame his subordinate for this. After all, Gong Yimo didn't want to distract the Duke. But the Duke didn't care about that. He couldn't stand knowing his imperial sister was suffering while he was powerless to help. He ignored his subordinate's pleas. This led to the scene from the beginning. The Duke put on his battle armor, but was held back by his subordinate. The one involved is confused, while the onlooker sees clearly. The subordinate was now thinking of everyone's best interests. He continued to persuade the Duke. "Your Highness is worried about the princess, but the princess's feelings for your Highness are also genuine. If you go back like this, wouldn't you be betraying the princess's painstaking efforts?" The Duke was still adamant. The subordinate then reassured the Duke. "The princess is resourceful and intelligent, and what she wants to see most is you achieving great things. This is only the first step. How can you give up halfway?" The Duke was still worried about his imperial sister. Without her, what's the use of achieving great things? The subordinate was shocked and quickly said, "The princess is no ordinary person. If your Highness goes back like this, wouldn't she be very disappointed?" These words were indeed effective. The Duke's heart trembled. Would he disappoint his imperial sister? His eyes then became firm. He absolutely could not let her down. Meanwhile, as night fell, Shitzi was helping a drunk Gong Yimo walk down the road. Hearing Shitzi say she couldn't hold her liquor, Gong Yimo started to act up, grabbing Shitzi and insisting she wasn't drunk yet. Looking at Gong Yimo like this, Shitzi became somewhat mesmerized, only to be interrupted by Gong Yimo. He then shyly said that his late mother was also just as unruly when she was drunk. The drunk Gong Yimo didn't think she was being unruly and struggled hard to break free from him. Seeing that Shitzi seemed unhappy after mentioning his late mother, she wanted to dance to cheer him up. With that, she pulled off her hair ribbon and began to dance. Gong Yimo's dancing was something that not even the Emperor had seen. Shitzi was truly lucky, admiring Gong Yimo's dance like a fanboy. Shitzi must have been completely captivated by Gong Yimo by now. Just then, the drunk Gong Yimo was about to fall, but luckily Shitzi quickly caught her. The atmosphere suddenly became ambiguous. Gong Yimo leaned in close to Shitzi's ear and told him to be wary of his emotions and urged him to trust her. Shitzi touched Gong Yimo's flushed face and said, "Little girl, I'll remember your words." Just then, a voice was heard. It was the Crown Prince. Shitzi quickly pulled Gong Yimo into his arms. Seeing this scene, the Crown Prince became jealous. The two immediately began a battle for Gong Yimo. The Crown Prince said he was Gong Yimo's imperial older brother. Shitzi said he was Gong Yimo's friend. Neither was willing to let the other take Gong Yimo away. Just then, the Crown Prince noticed that Gong Yimo was drunk. How dare Shitzi take a woman out drinking? This infuriated the Crown Prince. He pushed Shitzi's hand away, carried Gong Yimo away, and told him not to see Gong Yimo again. Shitzi said that the right for Gong Yimo to make friends was not in the Crown Prince's hands. The Crown Prince smiled faintly and retorted, "Is that so?" He seemed very confident in himself. He then carried Gong Yimo and strode away. Shitzi could only clench his fists and tremble as he watched the two leave. What could he do? He was the Crown Prince. At another courtyard, the Crown Prince placed Gong Yimo on his bed. Looking at the sleeping Gong Yimo, he said, "What a little rascal. Your Crown Prince brother was worried sick, and not only did you not send a message, you're sleeping so soundly." With that, he caressed Gong Yimo's face and was about to kiss her. This Crown Prince was trying to steal a kiss from his princess sister while she was asleep. Just as the Crown Prince's kiss was about to land, Gong Yimo suddenly pushed him away and said, "Duke, don't mess around. I'm so sleepy. Let me sleep." The Crown Prince's expression changed. He thought Is the Duke the only one in her dreams? Just then, an attendant ran towards him in a panic. Your Highness, it's bad. Something has happened to Her Majesty the Empress. It turned out someone had found evidence that the Empress had been secretly plotting to harm the imperial offspring all along. When the Emperor found out, he was furious and wanted to depose the Empress. The Crown Prince quickly ordered his subordinates to prepare. The next day in the imperial court, the Crown Prince knelt and pleaded, but how? Could the Emperor forgive such a thing? For the past decade, the Empress had been harming the imperial offspring. The evidence was conclusive. No matter how much the Crown Prince begged, it was useless. Then, one sentence from the Crown Prince enraged the Emperor. He said that the Empress did this only to secure his position as Crown Prince, and that he was willing to give up the position of Crown Prince for the Empress. The Emperor grabbed the Crown Prince's chin and said fiercely, "The position of Crown Prince was given to you by me. What? Why do you have to give it up?" With that, he ordered the Empress to be confined to Chiefing Palace. After hearing this, he became furious and finally made a harsh declaration. As for the throne, the capable will take it. With these words, the Crown Prince was reduced to a figurehead. Insulting the Crown Prince like this was worse than directly deposing him and choosing a new one. The crestfallen Crown Prince had just left the palace gates when he heard the gossip of those around him. The edict to depose the Crown Prince had not yet been formally issued, but these people were already distancing themselves from him and the Empress. It was truly disheartening. Just then, the Empress's servant came to ask for help. It turned out that after hearing the Emperor's edict, the Empress wanted to kill herself. This was another blow to the already desperate Crown Prince. But as a man, he had to be strong. The Crown Prince rushed to Chiefing Palace. Just as he entered, he saw the Empress holding a knife, preparing to stab herself. At this point, the Empress believed that everything she had meticulously planned had failed. The Empress cried out in despair, "What Crown Prince is there now?" The Emperor has already said that anyone can become Emperor. The Crown Prince snatched the knife and begged the Empress to believe him one more time. Since the capable will take the throne, why can't it be us? But the Empress laughed, tears streaming down her face, and said to the Crown Prince, "In terms of power, we can't compare to Consort Lucienne. In terms of wealth, we're even less of a match for noble Consort Rome. How can we make a comeback?" The Crown Prince was instantly disheartened, because it was indeed the truth. At the Crown Prince's residence, a young maidservant saw the Crown Prince return and quickly came forward to ask, "Your Highness, are you all right? The young lady has been asking me to wait here for you." The Crown Prince thought it must have been Gong Yimo's instruction. Faced with Gong Yimo's sisterly gentleness and consideration, the strong Crown Prince also showed his vulnerable side. He threw his arms around Gong Yimo and said he was so tired and didn't want to be the Crown Prince anymore. Gong Yimo, as expected, was different from others. She told the Crown Prince to rest well if he was tired. Seeing Gong Yimo like this, the Crown Prince let down all his defenses and held her tightly. But what Gong Yimo said next shocked the Crown Prince. She told the Crown Prince to persuade the Empress to hand over the Phoenix Seal and then request to leave the capital herself. The Crown Prince was puzzled. Why would Gong Yimo suggest this? This girl, after putting on makeup, was drinking and enjoying entertainment with men in a brothel. It turned out that after the Crown Prince's ordeal, Gong Yimo decided to help him regain his prestige. With that, she took out a map and began a plan, telling the Crown Prince to go south to build a canal, to fend off enemies. One couldn't neglect one's own development. It was better to go build the canal first and let those people fight amongst themselves. Besides, the Emperor's meaning was also very clear. The throne must go to a righteous person who has the people's support. Don't let a good opportunity go to outsiders. Why not work hard to win back the throne? But the Crown Prince felt it was inappropriate. Building a canal was a huge project that was not only costly in terms of labor and resources, but also time-consuming. He was afraid that before it was even finished, the political landscape in the capital would have already changed, and he would never have a chance to make a comeback. Gong Yimo told the Crown Prince not to worry. She would help with the finances, and she also had a strategy to assist the Crown Prince in 1 or 2 years to connect the north and south. By then, not to mention the Eastern Zhou, even the entire Yu would no longer suffer from floods. Right now, those who coveted the throne would love for the crown prince to undertake a fruitless task. But if this project succeeded, it would be remembered for generations. This project seemed costly and time-consuming, but Gong Yimo promised to fully assist. Just then, Gong Yimo suddenly proposed a condition. She hoped the Duke could also participate. The crown prince's brow furrowed. It was because of the Duke again. Gong Yimo continued, saying that the Duke's trip to Shizhou this time could utilize the existing canals for excavation. With the help of the king of Jinshi, he would soon be free. Meanwhile, the crown prince could use his own methods to speed up the excavation. Then, there would surely be ill-intentioned people who would want a piece of the pie. Instead of waiting for others to snatch it, it was better to share it directly with their own family. At this moment, the crown prince, like a pot of vinegar, said coldly, "I'm afraid the emperor won't agree." Gong Yimo had already anticipated these situations and said she had a way. She then leaned into the crown prince's ear and told him her plan. After that, the crown prince went to the palace. Waiting for the crown prince for a long time, Gong Yimo, sitting in the courtyard, was extremely bored. She wondered when the preparations for the trip south would be finished. She was so bored she was about to go crazy. Just then, a rustling sound from the wall alerted Gong Yimo. When she looked, it turned out to be Shitsi climbing over the wall. Seeing this amusing Shitsi arrive, Gong Yimo became happy to, "Isn't this Lord Shitsi? Why are you climbing the wall instead of using the main gate?" Shitsi whispered, "Keep your voice down. If it weren't for your deranged brother forbidding anyone from seeing you, I wouldn't be climbing the wall." With that, he excitedly told Gong Yimo that he was taking her to a fun place. Gong Yimo's interest was immediately piqued, and she quickly followed him. In a flash, Gong Yimo had changed into men's clothes. This led to the scene from the beginning. Shitsi had actually brought Gong Yimo to a brothel. Shitsi told Gong Yimo not to be anxious, as he had brought her here to discuss serious business. Gong Yimo didn't believe that these young masters could have any serious business. Shitsi immediately got worked up. "We've already drunk together, and you still don't believe me?" Just then, the son of the Minister of Revenue immediately spoke up. It turned out these people wanted to join Gong Yimo in the canal project to earn some merit. Gong Yimo had been wondering what these people were up to, so it was just this. She immediately agreed readily. Shitsi, however, lowered his head at the side. His family was too strict with him. How could they allow a Lord Shitsi to go? Just then, the brothel madam suddenly announced that the most beautiful woman in the world was coming out. The bustling brothel suddenly fell silent. People held their breath and stared at the center of the stage. Just then, a woman's gentle laughter was heard through a red gauze veil. Jin Yun greets all you gentlemen. These simple words, coming from Jin Yun's mouth, were infinitely charming. The men present were all mesmerized. Seeing the patron's strong reaction, the madam smiled until her eyes crinkled. Jin Yun, having come from afar, would like to invite the youngest official present to perform a duet with her to liven things up. At this, Jin Yun saw Gong Yimo upstairs and smiled sweetly. The madam was also very perceptive and pointed at Gong Yimo, saying, "This young master is the most handsome. It'll be you." Gong Yimo couldn't believe it was real and walked forward in a daze. The people around her, enjoying the show, also urged Gong Yimo to go quickly. Unexpectedly, after she went down, the madam even had Gong Yimo lead Jin Yun out for the duet. Walking into the red gauze, Gong Yimo carefully observed the beauty before her. On her neck, there was actually a petal-shaped birthmark. Gong Yimo smiled playfully. Wasn't the sponsor for the canal project actively seeking her out? Gong Yimo gentlemanly extended her hand, inviting Jin Yun to come out. Jin Yun politely placed her hand on hers and said, "I am greatly honored by your patronage, young master." The patrons upstairs, upon seeing Jin Yun's true face, let out gasps that were almost deafening. Gong Yimo then took the opportunity to invite Jin Yun to a dance. Jin Yun flicked her sleeves and began to dance gracefully to the music. The patrons were full of praise upon seeing it. Even Gong Yimo, a woman herself, was captivated. Just as Gong Yimo was lost in the moment, Jin Yun threw her a flirtatious glance and then tossed the white gauze wrapped around her body towards Gong Yimo. Along with it came an alluring, faint fragrance. Gong Yimo was a person who knew how to take a hint. With a gentle pull, she brought the white gauze and the beauty into her arms. Seeing that the atmosphere was perfect, Jinyun leaned close to Gong Yimo's ear and whispered softly, "Would you like to go to my private chambers for a deeper discussion?" Gong Yimo smiled wickedly and replied, "I wonder how deep the lady wants to go." Jinyun used her jade-like finger to lift Gong Yimo's chin and said again, "You will know once you come, young master." With that, Gong Yimo followed Jinyun into her private chambers. Shitsi, who had come with her, saw Gong Yimo actually follow Jinyun into her room and began to worry that she would be in danger. Li Ku, who was beside him, was not like the foolish Shitsi. He had long seen that this Jinyun was targeting Gong Yimo and also comforted Shitsi, telling him not to worry. Inside Jinyun's room, Gong Yimo had been teased to the point of being utterly captivated. Jinyun spoke coquettishly, "I thought you wouldn't come." Gong Yimo smiled playfully. "When a beauty invites, how could I not come?" Hearing her say this, Jinyun didn't want to pretend anymore. She lifted Gong Yimo's hair and laughed. "Do you really think you're a man? Princess Xiaoyang, I never thought you were such an interesting person." Gong Yimo, seeing her identity exposed, pushed Jinyun's hand away and pulled her into an embrace, saying to her, "If your intelligence gathering were a bit more precise, you would know that I am someone who does nothing without benefit. Unless what you have to say is tempting enough, I will not let you off easily." Jinyun shyly held Gong Yimo's hand and whispered, "What I have to say today is precisely about the canal project." Gong Yimo's interest was immediately piqued. Jinyun pulled Gong Yimo and smiled charmingly. "The princess must have a great need for funds. If you help Yuheng during the canal construction and establish trade with Yuheng, I guarantee the princess will make a fortune." With that, she pulled the princess towards the bed and fell back gracefully. Even though Gong Yimo was a woman, seeing the incredibly charming Jinyun made her heart flutter. This handsome young master ripped open the dress of the most beautiful woman in the world, and what appeared was a man's body. After listening to Jinyun's words, Gong Yimo felt that it was a good method with countless benefits. However, if she adopted his suggestion, after the secret channel was completed, she would have to dispatch special personnel to guard the pass to ensure the normal flow of trade. Wouldn't this be creating trouble for herself? So she refused the alluring Jinyun. Seeing that Gong Yimo was unwilling to accept the deal, Jinyun quickly grabbed her hand and seductively pulled her into an embrace, saying, "Then I will fund all of the princess's canal excavation." Who wouldn't accept such a great benefit? But Gong Yimo began to doubt Jinyun's identity again and retorted, "How could a brothel girl possibly come up with so much money? Perhaps this Jinyun is not a brothel girl at all." With that, it led to the beginning. Scene. Gong Yimo ripped open Jinyun's clothes and found that the person in front of her was just as she had guessed, the second prince of Yuheng, Jinyun. Wasn't Jinyun just a homonym for Jinyun? This was no challenge for the highly intelligent Gong Yimo. Jinyun quickly covered his chest and shouted that Gong Yimo was a hooligan. After a moment, the well-dressed, male-attired Jinyun walked out. Gong Yimo saw him and burst out laughing. Faced with such a smart and cute Gong Yimo, Jinyun didn't hold a grudge and curiously asked how she had discovered his identity. After all this time, no one had ever discovered his true identity. Gong Yimo said smugly, "Naturally, it's because of that unique petal birthmark." As she spoke, the scene of their life and death parting in their previous life flashed in her mind. In a last life, Jinyun had disobeyed his father's orders for Gong Yimo's sake, was hunted down, and died tragically in Gong Yimo's arms. At that time, he had said that if he wasn't the second prince of Yuheng and Gong Yimo wasn't the empress of Dayu, could they have been together? He once said that dying for Gong Yimo was worth it. Thinking of this, she became lost in thought. The Gong Yimo of the previous life had wronged many people, but if she had to say who she had wronged the most, it would be the second prince, Jinyun. Seeing Gong Yimo in a daze, Jinyun waved his hand in front of her. At this moment, Gong Yimo had already changed her mind. She no longer planned to accept Jinyun's benefits, but would still help him open the channel for trade. Jinyun never expected the princess to be so generous. Gong Yimo then stated her grand ambition. She could give up immediate small gains for her ideals. One day, she would make the four nations trade freely, opening their borders to commerce from all directions. Jinyan must have been stunned by the young woman before him. On the Duke's side, he was only a few days away from reaching Shizhou. The night was long, and today the Duke was also missing his imperial sister, Gong Yimo, very much. Just as he took out the lock of hair Gong Yimo had left him, a woman walked in carrying washing utensils. The Duke looked up. The person who came in was actually his imperial sister. Gong Yimo lifted her hair and said, "It's only been a short while since we parted. Have you forgotten me already?" The Duke was puzzled. How could his imperial sister be here? The Duke looked at the woman before him. It was actually Gong Yimo. Wasn't she in the capital? How could she have come to Shizhou? But the Duke, missing his imperial sister so much, had to believe that this was Gong Yimo. The imperial sister before him touched the Duke's face and said with concern, "You've lost weight." The Duke immediately hugged the woman in front of him like a small child. "Imperial sister, I miss you so much." The woman in front of him suddenly smiled charmingly. "Imperial sister misses you too. Didn't I come to see you?" With that, she slowly moved her hand to the Duke's chest and began to unbutton his clothes. The Duke immediately became alert. Gong Yimo would not treat him like this. He pushed her away and said, "Imperial sister, what are you doing?" The so-called imperial sister in front of him broke free from the Duke's hand and seductively pushed him down, saying, "Of course, I'm doing what you've always wanted to do." The Duke buttoned up his clothes and fiercely pushed the woman in front of him away. This person was not his imperial sister. His imperial sister would not be so wanton. But the woman was still relentless in trying to seduce the Duke. "Your Highness, the princess wouldn't do such things, but I can." It turned out this woman had lit drunken dream incense in the Duke's room, and this incense had the effect of confusing the mind. The Duke suddenly felt a splitting headache, as if he had been drugged. The woman giggled and said, "This incense just allows one to see the person they want to see." With that, she again walked to the Duke's side and lowered her voice. "Everything before you is what your Highness has always hidden in your heart. Things you wanted to say, but didn't dare to. Why bother with whether it's real or fake? Tonight, I am your Highness's imperial sister." The Duke grabbed the woman in front of him. "I in this world. She only needs to seduce me." As the woman struggled, the Duke noticed the Lui tattoo on her arm. It turned out this was a premeditated act. He handed her over to his subordinates for interrogation. These people had already started to target Gong Yimo. If they dared to make a move on the Duke, they would surely make a move on Gong Yimo. As long as he didn't have military power, Gong Yimo would not be safe. Thinking of this, the Duke made up his mind. He ordered his plan to begin and to advance at an accelerated pace. At this time, the Duke spread out a map and looked at the terrain of Lui, thinking, "Since you dare to provoke me, don't blame me for being impolite." At the Crown Prince's residence, Gong Yimo was seriously reading and studying. A maidservant came in to pass a message to Gong Yimo. "His Highness the Crown Prince said that we can leave the capital in 3 days. Gong Yimo was puzzled. Why didn't her Crown Prince brother come to tell her himself, but sent a maidservant instead? The maidservant stammered that she didn't know. But Gong Yimo noticed the maidservant's subtle glance outside. She then asked her if her Crown Prince brother had been avoiding her recently. In fact, the Crown Prince was just outside the window and had heard everything. Recently, whenever the Crown Prince saw Gong Yimo, he couldn't help but want to kiss her and hold her. How could he dare to face her when he had such improper feelings for his own sister? It wasn't that he wanted to deliberately avoid her, but only by doing so could he restrain this impulse and protect her from the cold judgment of the world. How could she understand? Seeing that she couldn't get anything out of her, Gong Yimo let the maidservant leave, but she still couldn't figure out why the Crown Prince was avoiding her. She hadn't done anything wrong. Just then, there was a sudden loud noise outside the window. Gong Yimo grabbed a knife, leaped lightly into the courtyard, and asked who was there. But she found that the person lying on the ground, covered in blood and seriously injured, was actually Shitzi. Shitzi, the high and mighty Shitzi, was lying seriously injured in front of Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo quickly helped him up and asked what had happened. Shun Shurya weakly said that his stepmother was trying to kill him, but he had nowhere to hide. Gong Yimo had once told him to trust her, so he came here. She pondered for a moment, then helped Shun Shurya towards the door. Just then outside, the sound of pursuing soldiers could be heard. "There are bloodstains here. Search carefully for me." The princess consort said she wants to see him, dead or alive. It seemed the princess consort had really gone all out to kill Shun Shurya. The entire residence had been mobilized. Shun Shurya didn't want to implicate Gong Yimo and said she just needed to hide him. Gong Yimo already had a plan in mind. She quickly took out the divine, pain-relieving medicine gifted by the emperor from her robes and gave it to Shun Shurya. In her previous life, Gong Yimo wasn't here, and Shun Shurya could only be killed by the vicious princess consort. In this life, with Gong Yimo here, she wouldn't be able to continue her evil deeds. Gong Yimo lowered her head and asked Shun Shurya, "Do you want to escape and avenge your mother?" Before he could react, Gong Yimo picked up Shun Shurya and ran towards Prince Ping's residence. To Prince Ping's residence? Of course, to crash the party. Gong Yimo's lightness skill was superb, and carrying Shun Shurya, she easily leaped over a bridge. At this moment, the mischievous Gong Yimo even joked that he should remember to repay her well. In the courtyard of Prince Ping's residence, a servant reported to the princess consort that they had not found Shun Shurya in the eastern city. This infuriated the princess consort. She turned and slapped him, cursing furiously. "Useless. You can't even catch an injured person. What are you doing back here? Get out and find him." A wicked maidservant beside her said to the princess consort, "Even if Shun Shurya really escaped, don't worry. The prince still has a clever plan to ensure that little beast doesn't live." The vicious princess consort didn't want him to escape. Killing Shun Shurya's mother was not enough to quell her hatred. She wanted to capture Shun Shurya and torture him, just as she had tortured his mother. Before she could finish, Gong Yimo's voice rang out, and then what? With that, she drew her sword and, pulling Shun Shurya along, leaped down from the roof. The princess consort, seeing the murderous princess Zhaoyang with her sword drawn, was so scared she immediately hid behind her maidservant. The maidservant quickly called for the guards to protect the princess consort. As soon as she spoke, a group of men with swords surrounded Gong Yimo and Shun Shurya. But what use was it to have more guards? For a master like Gong Yimo, it was just a piece of cake. Gong Yimo told Shun Shurya to hide behind her and watch how she would get justice for him. Shun Shurya, having witnessed his mother's tragic death as a child, frowned and said he wouldn't look as he was afraid of blood. Gong Yimo didn't care if he was afraid of blood or not. She leaped with her sword, and with a light slash, she cut the arteries on the guards' necks. Drops of blood dripped from the tip of her sword. Under the moonlight, Gong Yimo was even more imposing. Seeing the guards who rushed forward fall one by one, the princess consort retreated in disbelief. How could Gong Yimo let her go? She pressed forward step by step. Seeing that she couldn't escape, the princess consort shouted like a mad dog, "Stop! Gong Yimo, you are just a commoner now. Trespassing in a prince's residence is a capital crime. If you dare to harm me, Prince Ping and the emperor will not let you go." Gong Yimo was not afraid of her. She swung her sword and pressed it against the princess consort's neck. The princess consort was already breaking out in a cold sweat from fear. Gong Yimo said, "So what if I'm a commoner? No matter what, the emperor is still my father. He will not let his own daughter be harmed." It was laughable. Gong Yimo pressed her sword against the vicious princess consort's neck and asked her, "And then what?" The princess consort, looking at the murderous Gong Yimo before her, collapsed on the ground, trembling. "Please, don't kill me. It was the prince who wanted to kill him, not me." Seeing the princess consort's panicked state, Gong Yimo smiled and asked Shun Shurya, "Aren't you usually quite formidable outside? How could you be forced into hiding by a woman like this?" Shun Shurya looked at this cowardly and vicious woman before him. She was the murderer who had killed his gentle and kind mother. Gong Yimo saw what was in Shun Shurya's heart and handed the blood-stained sword to him, telling him to kill this woman. Shun Shurya took it and paused. Kill her? The one who had abused and killed his kind mother and now wanted to kill him. Shun Shurya's eyes snapped open, and he raised the sword and walked towards the princess consort. Seeing Shun Shurya, the princess consort was so frightened she kept backing away. "Shurya, I am your aunt, my own sister." Shun Shurya hardened his heart and said, "It is precisely because you are my aunt that you did those unconscionable things, which makes you even more deserving of death." With that, he stabbed the princess consort with his sword. Seeing Shun Shurya avenge his mother, Gong Yimo felt very gratified and asked him if he knew what to do next. Shun Shurya did not disappoint. Of course, he would not let anyone bully him again, including his father, the prince. Hearing his words, Gong Yimo also relaxed and took something out from her robes, telling Shun Shurya to keep it. Shun Shurya took it and saw that it was the as-if-present imperial command token that the emperor had given to Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo had thought of everything for him. Shunshurya no longer knew how to repay this person. Gong Yimo didn't care about these things and only told him to remember the conditions they had agreed upon when he came. Gong Yimo said she was leaving for the south tomorrow. If, when she returned, Shunshurya could take the position of commander of the imperial city garrison, she would pave the way for him. Given the chance to repay his debt, Shunshurya readily agreed. Half a month later, the crown prince, Gong Che, Gong Yimo, and the others had arrived at a bend in the Yangtze River and began the construction work. He looked at the grand scene before him with a gentle expression. With a single order, accompanied by the gongs and drums of the workers, the ceremony to worship heaven began with great fanfare. Gong Yimo, holding a torch, walked forward gracefully. Next, they would see how she performed a magic trick to level this small island. With that, she used the torch to light the explosives that had been buried long ago. With a sizzling sound, the Yangtze River area began to shake violently. The huge rocks in the river exploded, flying in all directions. The peasants watching this scene thought the river god was angry and quickly hid. After a loud bang, it became quiet. When the smoke cleared, people looked up again and were astonished. The small island from just a moment ago had disappeared. Seeing such a scene, everyone began to exclaim in amazement. How could such a large island be leveled in an instant? That girl just now must be a goddess. Gong Ge suddenly became nervous. Gong Yimo was just here a moment ago. How did she disappear in the blink of an eye? Have you ever seen a brother who dotes on his sister like a girlfriend? Gong Che is that kind of brother. Gong Yimo had only disappeared for a short while, and he was already as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Gong Che, ignoring the bone-chilling cold of the river water, stepped into the water to search for Gong Yimo. Even though the water was up to his waist, he did not stop his steps. As he walked forward, he found that it was completely silent ahead. Where on earth did Gong Yimo go? The thought that his imperial sister might have been knocked unconscious by the force of the explosion or that some other accident had occurred made Gong Che panic and fall to the ground. He didn't want this to happen, and he also believed that Gong Yimo wouldn't get into trouble so easily. So he continued to walk forward, searching for Gong Yimo. The river was very wide, and even shouting Gong Yimo's name yielded no echo. Suddenly, Gong Che felt a pulling sensation on his calf. Was it seaweed, or was something entangled around him? When he looked down, he was startled. A hand had grabbed his foot. Before Gong Che could fully react, Gong Yimo emerged from the water like a lotus flower. Seeing his lively imperial sister before him, Gong Che's heart was instantly at ease. He hugged Gong Yimo tightly, still shaken that it's so good that you're all right. Gong Yimo, nestled in Gong Che's arms, said, "Were you scared? Who told you to ignore me for so long?" Before Gong Yimo could finish, Gong Che started to get angry. "Are you crazy? Why would you scare me like that? Why?" This mischievous little girl was actually joking with her own life. This was going to make him die of anger. Seeing that her imperial brother was truly angry, Gong Yimo explained in a panic, "I didn't mean to scare you. I said that just to annoy you. I was just entangled by seaweed and almost suffocated in the water." When Gong Che heard that he had misunderstood his adorable imperial sister, he held her tightly and comforted her. "Don't scare me like that again. I was really scared." Gong Yimo was instantly happy. "Great. My crown prince brother still cares about me. Unlike the past 2 days when he ignored me. I thought I had fallen out of favor." How could Gong Yimo ever fall out of favor with Gong Che? He couldn't dote on her and love her enough. She was the person he couldn't let go of even in death. Gong Yimo asked Gong Che with wide eyes, "Will my crown prince brothers still ignore me?" The crown prince promised he never would again. He thought to himself, "It was Gong Yimo who forced me not to let go. It was she who insisted on appearing before me, making me fall in love. How could I let her go?" As soon as Gong Yimo was helped ashore, she was surrounded by a woman. "Princess, it's so good that you're all right. That was truly thrilling just now. How on earth was such a large island leveled in an instant?" Gong Yimo saw that everyone had questions in their hearts. Her eyes suddenly became firm. She knelt on the ground with a thud. Everyone was curious why the dignified princess would kneel to the common people. At this moment, Gong Yimo cupped her hands and said, "Everyone, please accept my bow. I have a favor to ask." With that, Gong Yimo kowtowed deeply to everyone. The crowd quickly asked the princess to just give her command. How could they accept such a bow? Seeing everyone's sincerity, Gong Yimo told them the truth of the matter. The scene just now was not a miracle, but the effect of explosives. Everyone was in disbelief and exclaimed in amazement that aren't explosives the things used to make fireworks? How could they be so powerful? Gong Yimo patiently explained that this was an explosive she had carefully improved, so of course, it was more powerful than ordinary black powder. If this kind of explosive was used to dig the canal, it could benefit all people, but if it fell into the hands of ill-intentioned people, it would mean endless war and rivers of blood. On the smoke-filled battlefield, children who had lost their families were everywhere. The roar of cannons drowned out their cries. War is ruthless, and the common people are innocent. The ground was stained red with blood. This was Gong Yimo's most painful memory from her previous life. Since heaven had given her a chance to be reborn, then in this life, she would absolutely not let such a tragedy happen again. Gong Yimo requested the villagers that if anyone else came to inquire, they must not, under any circumstances, leak the matter of the explosives. The villagers, seeing the princess's grave expression, guessed the seriousness of the matter and immediately swore that they would not leak a single word about it. The next morning, as soon as Gong Yimo woke up, she went to check on the construction progress. She thought that by using explosives to blast out the river channel in advance and then manually repairing it, the canal could be completed in less than 2 years. At this moment, a little girl walked up to Gong Yimo's side. "Fairy sister, someone asked me to give this to you." Being called Fairy Sister first thing in the morning made Gong Yimo very happy. She took the item and opened it. "Imperial Sister." Upon seeing this letter, Gong Yimo saw that it was a letter from the Duke, and her face flushed like a peach blossom. The Duke hadn't contacted her for a long time, but as she read on, Gong Yimo's brow furrowed. The Duke actually said he wanted to seize power. Since he had this plan, he would definitely need a large amount of funds. The purpose of the Duke's letter this time was to hope that his imperial sister could transfer all the land deeds in her hands to the king of Jinshi's residence in Shizhou. Meanwhile, the Duke was arguing with his maternal grandfather. After the incident with the Lui people, the Duke no longer wanted to be the obedient child manipulated by his grandfather and imperial sister. His grandfather earnestly tried to persuade him, saying that the princess did this because she was afraid that knowing would affect his achievements. But the Duke was no longer that wet-behind-the-ears child. He retorted to his grandfather, "Living day in and day out under the protective net you two have woven together. How can I achieve great things? How can I protect my imperial sister?" The Duke insisted on building his own career. Only then would he have enough capital to stand shoulder to shoulder with his outstanding imperial sister. The king of Jinshi, seeing that he couldn't persuade the Duke, played the emotional card. "Then you can't break your imperial sister's heart. If you want to take back all the control we have, you should at least inform the princess." At the mention of his imperial sister, the Duke's eyes softened. He had already told his imperial sister about this, and he believed his imperial sister would definitely support him. The king of Jinshi was suddenly speechless. When on earth did his grandson tell the princess? He hadn't heard a single word about it. Seeing that he had basically persuaded his grandfather, the Duke planned to leave to visit the common people outside. The king of Jinshi said that Shizhou was originally suffering from a disaster, and then a large-scale epidemic broke out. The Duke had just arrived and had already saved a large number of people. They were all grateful to the Duke in their hearts, so he told the Duke to go see them. The streets of Shizhou were a desolate scene. The Duke walked along the road, looking at the people who had collapsed on the ground from hunger, and felt very heavy-hearted. The people on the side saw the Duke walking towards them and got up one by one to kowtow to him. "Ninth Prince, may you be blessed." The Duke gently helped the people up and said to them, "There's no need to be so formal in front of me. Please, everyone rise quickly." At this moment, an old woman who was helped up said to the Duke with tears in her eyes, "Thank you, Your Highness, for your great kindness. If you hadn't arrived in time and set up a medical station to dispense free medicine, we would definitely not have survived this epidemic." The afflicted people all began to thank the Duke. Without the Duke, they would not have survived this epidemic. The Duke was a good prince who loved his people like his own children, because he knew that he who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. This is what I should do. There is no need for formalities. At this moment, a cute little girl with 2 pigtails ran towards the Duke, threw herself at him, and hugged his thigh, asking, "Aren't princes very busy?" Why do you come to see us every day, brother? It seems even a child could feel the Duke's dedication to the people of Shijo. The Duke gently squatted down and patted the little cutie's head, because brother can't bear to see everyone suffer from the epidemic and hopes that everyone can get well soon. After answering the child's question, the Duke began to help an old grandmother by the side wash a towel, as the old woman's condition improved. The young man next to her was suddenly embarrassed. Your Highness, you mustn't. How can we trouble you with such rough work? The Duke didn't think it was a big deal and gently wiped the sweat from the old grandmother's forehead. Have you been giving her the medicine I brought for the capital on time? The young man's face was full of joy. The old grandmother was seriously ill, but after taking the medicine the Duke gave her, her fever has gone down. She will probably wake up tomorrow. Your Highness is truly a living bodhisattva to our family. The Duke was very pleased to hear this, but he had only walked a few steps back when he heard a sentence from behind him. What a hypocrite! The Duke turned around and saw that the person who said this was the same young man who had just called him a living bodhisattva. These nobles are just putting on show for us. Only a fool would believe it. These words from the young man were also heard by the other refugees, and another round of gossipy chatter began. Some people spoke up for the Duke, but others were swayed and spoke ill of him. They didn't know that the Duke, who hadn't gone far, had heard everything. The Duke didn't want his sincerity to be mistaken by the people as just an act, so he turned and walked to a high platform in an alley, wanting to prove himself. He stood on it and, in front of everyone, began to swear an oath. Let the heavens be my witness. I, the Duke, am absolutely sincere in leading everyone to resist the epidemic. To show my sincerity, from now on, I will eat and live with everyone and personally take care of the sick people until the epidemic disappears. The people below were extremely shocked. He was a prince, yet he could cast aside his status to eat and live with us. The Duke thought to himself, he who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. Imperial sister, do you see this? This is the will of the people. Looking at the trust the people had in him, he knew that one day he would stand on a higher place and receive the admiration of all the people in the world. Meanwhile, Gong Yimo was sitting alone, reading the Duke's letter. She didn't expect that the crown prince, the three of them, came to find him. When Gong Yinma saw them walking toward her, she quickly hid the letter. Gong Che noticed that Gong Yinma seemed to be in a bad mood and asked her, "Why do you look so troubled? Is something on your mind?" Seeing that Gong Che had noticed her unease, Gong Yinma pretended to be concerned, propping up her chin and starting to invent a reason. With no good excuse, she could only say she was worried about the clouds and her work. The riverbed is now too high and severely silted, making the work efficiency far too low. Gong Che thought she was genuinely worried about the canal and also started to think of a solution to what you're saying is, seeing that she had gotten away with it. Gong Yinma then explained in detail the plan she had long prepared to implement. After damming the flow, we can excavate in multiple sections simultaneously. This will prevent those problems. Upon hearing this method, the person next to them couldn't help but praise it repeatedly. Brilliant! This way, the project speed can be increased significantly. Can we return to the capital sooner? The Crown Prince also agreed with this excellent strategy and immediately assigned tasks to everyone. It's so good to have such a resourceful younger sister. Yinma, you truly are my lucky star. Just then, Gong Yinma was suddenly bumped by someone. When she looked down, she found a piece of paper in her hand. Have you ever seen a transmigrated female lead with such flourishing luck and love? Gong Yinma, who had just finished discussing her strategy, received a piece of paper slipped to her by a man. On it was clearly written, "Tonight, at the hour of Z, by the snow." Looking at the handwriting, Gong Yinma was stunned for a moment. Isn't this Jin Yu's handwriting? His asking her out now seems to be about discussing their deal. At the hour of Z, by the snow, Gong Yinma went alone to the riverside pavilion. As soon as she arrived, she saw Prince Jin Yun waiting for her. Bathed in the moonlight, Jin Yun appeared exceptionally handsome and refined. Long time no see, Princess Xiaoyang. Before coming, Gong Yinma had already guessed why Jin Yun had asked to meet her, so she got straight to the point and asked if the preparations were complete and if he was ready to discuss the matter of shipbuilding with her. Hearing that Gong Yinma had already figured it out, Jin Yun didn't try to persuade her further. The princess's mind is as sharp as ever. It's a good thing you're not a man. Otherwise, before he could finish, Gong Yinma playfully teased, "Otherwise, you'd have to offer yourself to me in marriage?" Jin Yun could only shake his head helplessly and say, "Stop that. I have." A shipyard by Hongzhou Lake. Consider this deed my gesture of sincerity for our cooperation. Seeing Jin Yun being so generous, Gong Yinma accepted it readily and asked him, "You didn't come all this way just for this one thing, did you?" Jin Yun knew Gong Yinma very well. Knowing that Gong Yinma cared deeply for Gong Ju, he had gathered some information for her. The moment Gong Yinma heard it was related to Gong Ju, her interest was immediately piqued, and she asked with concern, "What information?" Jin Yun then told her what his Yueheng spies had learned. Recently, Li has been making frequent moves on the Shizhou border. Although it won't stir up any major storms, it will be enough to keep Gong Ju busy for a while. Gong Yinma suddenly became alert. What kind of trouble is that small state of Lui stirring up now? From the Shizhou side, a scout rushed to report that Lui had suddenly stationed a large number of troops at the border, at a location not marked on the map. The Prince of Jinxi's brow furrowed, and he began to worry. For Lui to suddenly station a large number of troops, there must be some conspiracy, said Gongju. Should I lead some men to investigate? But the Prince of Jinxi said, winter is coming soon. The Lui border is desolate. If they start a war now, their provisions will surely be insufficient. We will hold our position for now. But Gongju grew worried. Lui, which normally doesn't provoke others, suddenly acting this way is always cause for alarm. The Prince of Jinxi calmly reassured Gongju, even if Lui really does launch a major invasion, RDU troops are no pushovers. Have everyone remain on high alert. For tonight, let's get a good rest. A soldier at the side, not understanding, asked Gongju, are we really not making a move? Gongju also felt that his maternal grandfather was underestimating the enemy. He believed that Lui, having suddenly stationed their troops, would surely think that EU forces had let their guard down and would launch a sneak attack. Moreover, once war breaks out, it's the surrounding commoners who will suffer. Who knows how many more people will die tragically under the enemy's blades. At this thought, Gongju clenched his fists. With the people in his heart, he would absolutely not allow such a tragedy to happen. Holding military power means protecting the people of the region. He would absolutely not sit by and do nothing. With that, he ordered his subordinate to assemble a team of elites to accompany him on a reconnaissance mission tonight. He was determined to nip Lui's conspiracy in the bud. As night deepened, Gongju and his men arrived at the Lui border to investigate and found several enemy soldiers, roasting meat and chatting idly. Listening closely, they indeed had an ulterior motive. What's it like for a foreigner to suddenly appear right after you've been bullied by your leader? This pretty young lady panicked upon seeing Gongju enter, dressed all in black. It turned out that just moments ago, after Gongju's party secretly arrived at the enemy camp, they had overheard some secrets. These few soldiers were still leisurely, eating roasted meat and chatting, completely unaware that someone was watching them from behind. Mengna, how much longer do we have to wait? Looking at the weather, the first snow will fall tonight. Just a few more days. As soon as the heavy snow starts, we will immediately press our army forward and catch them off guard. Gongju had indeed guessed their objective. They were just waiting for the DU forces to relax their guard before launching a sneak attack. With heavy snow imminent, Gongju had to send someone back to warn the Prince of Jinxi to prepare in advance. The subordinate was worried about Gongju and asked him what he would do. Gongju was not afraid of these nobodies. He was already prepared to play with them until the end. The subordinate also knew how capable Gongju was, and that leaving him here wouldn't be a problem at all. He leaped up and immediately headed back to deliver the message. Over here were the enemy's provisions. Gongju certainly wouldn't let this grate. Opportunity slipped by and began to deploy a brilliant plan for a sneak attack. A dark and windy night is most suitable for giving the enemy a little surprise. With that, everyone headed towards the enemy camp to investigate. After approaching the enemy camp, Gongju waved his hand, signaling his subordinates to begin the plan. Everyone, just wait and watch the show. Suddenly, a series of wolf howls echoed from the surroundings. It turned out Gongju's brilliant plan was to lure the snake out of its hole. In the dead of night, the sleeping enemy soldiers all came out one by one to see why there were wolves here. Just then, the enemy soldiers suddenly spotted someone in the distance that it's not our people, it's an enemy. Spy, men, come and catch the villain. Everyone hastily grabbed their sabers and ran in that direction. Quick, go help. Once the sneak attack plan is exposed, everyone will be implicated and no one will survive. Most of the enemy soldiers were drawn to the other side. This meant their encampment had become the most poorly defended place. Gongju was indeed clever. Seeing that the enemy had fallen for the bait, he quickly headed to the military camp to check. With the enemy soldiers lured away, the camp seemed exceptionally quiet. As he walked further, he heard a strange sound. Listening closely, it seemed to be the crying of a woman. Why would there be a woman's crying in a military camp? Gongju walked over and saw a large man in a tent hitting a weak woman. The man pushed the woman down, saying he would deal with her after he caught the spy. With that, he strode out of the tent. After bullying a weak woman, he went out to play the hero. The man led a small squad and began to check the tents one by one, saying they must find that spy. Seeing the enemy approaching, Gongju slipped into the tent where the woman had just been beaten. This brings us to the beginning of the story. Gongju saw that the woman before him was frightened and about to scream. He quickly covered her mouth. The situation was urgent. The voices of the soldiers outside were heard. They noticed this was the only tent they hadn't checked and were about to come in. Gongju, using his quick wits, thought of another brilliant idea and asked the woman, "Would you like to make a deal with me? Quick, look, have you ever seen such a charming and alluring regent king?" Gongju's brilliant method was to change into a disguise and hide here. The footsteps of the soldiers outside grew closer and closer. When they violently threw open the tent flap, they were stunned. Inside were two beautiful women. Who's there? The girl who was changing was clearly startled. Gongju, with his back exposed, looked at them alluringly and threatened. "What are you doing? We are about to perform a dance for the marshal. If you delay us, can you bear the consequences?" The soldiers at the entrance, looking at the two sexy beauties, were so scared they were momentarily speechless. Seeing the soldiers gradually walk away, Gongju told the woman his idea. Of course, she didn't know that the person before her was the used soul. "Later, I will go perform the dance in your place. You just need to take the opportunity to set the supply wagons outside on fire, and you can escape back to the main camp in the chaos. Use this jade pendant to shed your slave status and never have to endure such humiliation again. Are you willing?" The woman, upon hearing she could shed her slave status, her eyes suddenly became firm that "I am willing." Outside, someone came to hurry the woman to dance. The dancers, "Hurry up and go over there. Don't dawdle and make the marshal wait. No one will have a good time then." The situation was urgent. Gongju instructed the woman that she must. Once the provisions were burned, the camp would surely be in chaos. This was her only chance to escape. With that, Gongju went out and faced the soldiers, acting like a mother hen going to the market. The soldier was still viciously urging him, "Hurry up." Gongju was still a little worried, constantly looking back on the way to see if the girl had taken action. Seeing her sneak out of the tent and cautiously walk towards the granary, Gongju could finally go and perform for the marshal with a peaceful mind. In the main tent, the enemy officers were still drinking and chatting idly. "This time we must catch them off guard. Cheers!" Seeing the dancing girl walk in, the marshal was taken aback. This woman had a delicate face and a tall figure, truly a stunning beauty. The already tipsy marshal stroked his chin and said slowly, "This beauty looks unfamiliar. Come here and let this marshal have a good look." Gongju smiled faintly. This marshal was indeed a sensualist. He walked forward alluringly and poured wine for the marshal. "Marshal, you are so heroic. Ordinary dances probably won't catch your eye. I have newly choreographed a sword dance. I wonder if I might have the honor of the marshal's critique." The marshal was already entranced and told Gongju to perform quickly. Accompanied by music, Gongju began to dance alluringly with a sword. These men had never seen a woman with such good swordsmanship and became excited. Gongju, veiled in red gauze, gave off an ethereal feeling. While dancing with the sword, he didn't forget to give the marshal a flirtatious glance. The surrounding enemy officers, seeing a beauty wield a sword for the first time, couldn't help but clap and cheer. On the other side, the woman had already reached the enemy's granary. She thought to herself that she had a chance for a new life and must not fail her benefactor's hopes. She was originally a girl from a good family, but was abducted by these barbarians to this place, suffering daily humiliation and living a life worse than a pig or a dog. This debt will be repaid today. With that thought, the woman threw the fire starter in her hand towards the granary. "What's it like to have your granary burned by the enemy the day before you're about to launch a sneak attack. This weak woman single-handedly burned down the Lui people's granary. Looking at the fire before her, the woman's face was filled with resentment as she said, "Benefactor, this young woman has done what she promised you." Smoke billowed everywhere. The soldiers finally discovered the granary was ablaze. Fire! Someone, help put out the fire. The fire burned more and more fiercely. These young lads, in their panic, even forgot to use water. Watching the fumbling enemies, the woman happily and quickly escaped. At this moment, the marshal, who was enjoying the dance, sensed something was wrong and asked why it was so chaotic outside. Gongju saw that the marshal was about to get up and go check, so he leaped into the air and flew towards the marshal on his seat. The marshal was shocked. What's going on? A mere weak woman possesses lightness skill? Gongju lifted the marshal's chin with his sword and said seductively, "Marshal, how can you be distracted by looking elsewhere? If you don't look at me, I'll get angry." The marshal felt the sword inching closer to his carotid artery and panicked, asking with sweat beading on his forehead, "What are you doing?" Gongju lightly pricked the marshal's neck. With a swish, fresh blood flowed out. Gongju stared with sharp eyes at the cowardly marshal before him. "Angering me has very serious consequences." The surrounding soldiers, seeing the marshal being attacked, quickly drew their swords and surrounded Gongju. The enemy's deputy commander asked, "Who are you to dare assassinate the marshal?" With that, he swung his saber at Gongju. How could this minor officer possibly harm Gongju? Gongju simply turned his sword and blocked the soldier's incoming blade. The deputy commander's face was full of shock. "You can block my saber?" Gongju didn't want to waste any more words with him. He thrust his sword towards the deputy commander, and the enemy deputy commander was killed. Gongju looked at the fallen deputy commander with disdain and said, "You thought your saber skills were that good? Now the most skilled deputy commander had been killed by the weak woman before them." The soldiers were so scared they didn't dare to approach Gongju and hurriedly ran to call for people to catch the assassin. As soon as the young soldier stepped out of the tent, he was terrified by the scene before him. In just a short time, what on earth had happened outside? Before him was a raging fire, and what was burning was the granary. How can this be? The soldier thought. The granary is burned, and the marshal and deputy commander have both been killed. It's all over now. This young soldier was so shocked by the sudden chaos that he forgot Gongju was still behind him with a sword. Before he could react, Gongju swung his sword and stabbed the soldier. He had finally vented his hatred. Without provisions and a leader, let's see what you'll use to launch a sneak attack. The soldiers who had been called were still chasing Gongju relentlessly. The spy is here. Come on, men. Gongju didn't pay these nobodies any mind. What's the use of having more people? If they want to catch him, they'll have to see if they have the skill. Gongju deliberately ran in front of them, and sure enough, those soldiers started chasing him. Running to the edge of a forest, Gongju suddenly stopped. Ahead was a poisonous fog. The soldiers behind him, seeing Gongju, advised him to surrender. Peacefully, no one has ever entered this poisonous fog forest and come out alive. Hearing this, Gongju smiled and retorted, "Holy Lord, if you were given a chance to be reborn, what would you do?" Night had fallen, but the crown prince still couldn't sleep. The canal was now being excavated smoothly, but a large number of ships were still needed. Where to get the ships? This was a big problem. Gong Yinma saw that Gong Che was still awake so late and walked in. "Tomorrow we're going to excavate the next section of the river. Brother Crown Prince, why do you look so troubled?" Gong Yinma took a step forward and guessed, "Are you worried about not having anywhere to procure ships?" Gong Che was indeed having a headache over the shipbuilding matter. Seeing her brother so worried, the clever Gong Yinma said, "I knew Brother Crown Prince would be worried about this, so I prepared in advance." Gong Che had a look of disbelief. Gong Yinma then excitedly pulled Gong Che to go and see. On the way, Gong Yinma said that when the canal excavation first began, she had acquired a shipyard and had been rushing to build ships all this time. Gong Yinma certainly wouldn't tell him about Jin Yun. Hearing Gong Yinma's words, Gong Che was very pleased. His little imperial sister was so resourceful, she could even get her hands on a shipyard. Upon hearing that Gong Yinma had already built 20 ships, and there were medium-sized cargo ships at that. How could so many ships be built in such a short time? Gong Che asked in shock how Gong Yinma had managed. to do it. Gong Yinma smiled. And that's not all. I just received even better news. Come with me quickly. Gong Che thought, what could be more surprising than these 20 ships? He certainly couldn't imagine the scene he was about to see. It was so magnificent. Arriving at the riverbank, Gong Yinma stood on her tiptoes and covered Gong Che's eyes, wanting to give him a surprise. Gong Che felt a bit shy. His imperial sister rarely treated him like this. What could the surprise be? When he opened his eyes, oh my God, so many large and medium-sized ships. This sister of his was truly amazing. Gong Yinma could see Gong Che's shock. Didn't expect this, did you? These are the masterpieces I've created. I've calculated that in a little while, it will be Father Emperor's birthday. How about we present this to Father Emperor as a birthday gift? Gong Che also thought this was a great idea. Gong Yinma's inner thought was, of course, hoping the Emperor would like it very much and would no longer depose the Crown Prince. In Zhaoyang Hall, a eunuch was reporting an urgent situation to the Emperor. The good news reported was that Gong Ju had performed miraculous feats in Shizhou. Not only did he personally lead his men with love for the people, but he also dismantled the enemy's sneak attack plot. Upon hearing this, the Emperor beamed with joy. This child has truly surprised me. When he returns to the capital, I must reward him heavily. After saying that, the Emperor thought of the Crown Prince's side. How are things over there? The eunuch immediately lowered his head and dared not make a sound. The Emperor noticed and asked sharply, what's wrong with his side? The Crown Prince and the Princess, using some unknown method, have made the canal construction proceed very quickly. The Crown Prince also loves the people as his own children, personally taking part in everything. The people's acclaim for him is extremely high. The Emperor thought, isn't this very good? His own son and daughter are also capable. But what the eunuch said next made the Emperor's heart. Have you ever seen such a selfish father? He even guards against his own children as if they were thieves. The eunuch said, the problem lies in this popular acclaim. The people along the canal now only know of the Crown Prince, and not of this Yu dynasty or you, your majesty. This is clearly a case of his achievements overshadowing his master. After saying this, the eunuch hesitated again, not speaking the truth, just like a treacherous minister with a conspiracy. The Emperor asked what else? The eunuch stated that a rumor had been circulating among the people, saying that the Crown Prince's canal construction was so fast that he must have the help of a divine person. Then, this eunuch added fuel to the fire, saying, but your servant sent people to investigate, and this so-called divine person is Princess Zhaoyang herself. The princess had the people spread this rumor all for the sake of a secret weapon in her hands. The Emperor immediately became cautious and asked, what secret weapon? The eunuch continued, it is said that this weapon can move mountains and fill seas. Nothing in this world can stop it. The Emperor was very surprised. Could it be that exaggerated? How can there be such a weapon in this world? The eunuch dropped to his knees with a thud and raised his hand, swearing that every word he said was true. This item was personally made by the princess. These actions by the eunuch successfully enraged the Emperor. What only knows the Crown Prince? What a divine person's help. She secretly built this kind of weapon behind my back. Is she planning to rebel? With that, he gave a sinister smile. I will absolutely not allow something that could easily topple the Yu Empire to be in the hands of others. Not even my own children. Gong Yinma's side was still foolishly preparing a surprise for the Emperor, unaware that her father already had murderous intentions toward her. Should we add a majestic dragon head to the bow of the ship? This silly girl was still happily thinking that the uncle she had called Father Emperor for so many years would surely feel very happy. Just then, a servant ran in frantically. Something terrible has happened. Your servant really doesn't know how to say it. Princess, you should hurry to the riverbank and see. It turned out that people had dug up a bronze ding from the river. This was the one used to fill the river when King Wu excavated the Yulong Canal in ancient times. People began to discuss it amongst themselves that I heard there are words on that ding. What words? I wouldn't dare say. Saying it could get your head chopped off. A man nearby whispered, isn't this a decree from heaven, telling everyone that it is not satisfied with the current emperor and wants to hand the world over to the Crown Prince? Gong Yinma stepped forward and ripped the red cloth off the ding. On it was clearly written, he who repairs the canal will bring prosperity to the world. Seeing these 4 words, prosperity to the world, Gong Yinma thought, this is bad. The petty emperor would surely be furious if he found out, thinking, They had been plotting for a long time. The commoners on the side, however, didn't know the severity of the situation and were still saying this was a decree from heaven, that the crown prince and princess would bring prosperity to the world. Saying this, they all began to kowtow to Gong Yinma. Gong Yinma was now frantic. This was not a heavenly auspicious sign at all. Father Emperor was most wary of an imperial son succeeding to the throne. This was clearly a blatant frame-up. Gong Yinma quickly ordered her subordinates to take the ding away. This must be someone trying to frame the crown prince. She quickly took people to find him. Just then, a servant ran over in a panic. "Princess, something terrible has happened. Have you ever seen a crown prince this miserable?" One second, he was working hard repairing the canal. The next, he was lying on the ground, seriously injured. Seeing Gong Che's personal guard running over in a hurry, Gong Yinma felt that something was terribly wrong. Sure enough, Brother Crown Prince had been assassinated. Gong Yinma's face changed drastically. The ding had just been discovered, and Gong Che was assassinated. Inside the Crown Prince's room, the imperial physician was taking the pulse of the heavily wounded Crown Prince. "Why are the injuries so severe?" Gong Yinma anxiously asked about his condition. The physician's face was grave as he said the situation was not good, but thankfully, he took a great recovery pill in time. "The Crown Prince's injuries are severe. He must stay here to recuperate and probably cannot continue with the excavation team. He must stay here." Gong Yinma's face grew heavy. "Staying here, I'm afraid there will still be people with ill intentions." She collapsed onto the ground. The guards Gong Che took with him on his inspection of the riverbank were all his trusted men, yet his whereabouts were still leaked, and he was assassinated. At the same time, someone else dug up a so-called auspicious sign in the river channel. What on earth was going on? How could all this be so perfectly coordinated? Could it be that there's an insider? If the emperor finds out about the auspicious sign, he will surely be furious and summon us back. At that time, how could he care about the crown prince's assassination? He would only pin the crime of defying an edict on us. Thinking of this, Gong Yinma broke out in a cold sweat. "I can't have been reborn just to be killed by my own father, can I? No, I absolutely cannot sit and wait for death. Right now, the only way is to confess proactively and strike first." Gong Yinma quickly got up and ordered someone to report to the emperor. "We can't just let ourselves be slaughtered like this. Quick, go report to the emperor that someone has secretly harmed the crown prince, deliberately created rumors, and sent assassins." Before she could finish, someone came to report, "Princess, it's bad. His Majesty's imperial edict has arrived." How could it be so fast? Could the emperor have known all along? A eunuch walked in with his men and announced the edict. "Crown Prince, receive the edict." Gong Yinma stepped forward and said, "Brother Crown Prince was assassinated and is currently unconscious. I will receive the edict on his behalf." This eunuch was clearly looking for trouble. Insolence. How can His Majesty's imperial edict be received by another? This is contempt for imperial authority, a crime punishable by law. Gong Yinma was not one to be trifled with. She pointed at Gong Che lying on the bed and said, "The crown prince is now seriously injured. How can he receive the edict? I have shown contempt for imperial authority and should be punished by law. You have disregarded the crown prince's life, so what crime should you be charged with?" The eunuch, seeing that Gong Yinma's argument was reasonable and irrefutable, had no choice but to let her receive the edict on his behalf. "Today, we have heard that the crown prince intends to bring prosperity to the world. We do not understand its meaning and wish to hear his explanation in person. We hereby issue this order, commanding the crown prince to return to the palace immediately." After hearing this, Gong Yinma felt a chill in her heart. This wasn't a request to hear Brother Crown Prince's explanation. This was clearly a summons for him to accept the charge of high treason. "Father Emperor, we have been here meticulously preparing for you, yet you suspect us like this." The imperial physician beside them heard this and quickly intervened. "The canal is not yet open. If we travel by land, the crown prince has just been assassinated and needs to rest. He cannot bear the bumpy journey." This annoying eunuch started making trouble again. "Physician Sue, so according to you, we should wait for the canal to be open and let the crown prince travel back to the capital by water? We'd be waiting till the cows come home." This girl like a fairy descended to earth, actually completed in one night what hundreds of men couldn't do in over 10 days. The crown prince was seriously injured, yet the emperor wanted him to return to the capital immediately to report. The physician was worried that the crown prince's body couldn't handle the strain, but the eunuch delivering the edict said that the return to the capital could not be delayed. Gong Yinma, worried about the crown prince's health, guaranteed that she would open the canal within 1 day. After 1 day, they could return to the capital by boat. The arrogant eunuch thought Gong Yinma was daydreaming, connecting the north and south in 1 day. Even a great immortal couldn't do it. He just waited to see how Gong Yinma's head would roll the next day. At night, Gong Yinma rode her horse towards the canal. Who says one person can't dig a canal? Gong Yinma stretched out her jade-like hand, and a purple pattern flashed. A modern explosive pack appeared in her hand. Brother Crown Prince, she was going all out. She pressed the explosive pack against the bank. Tomorrow morning, you all just wait to see a divine miracle. The next morning, a series of loud bangs woke me from my deep sleep. I opened the tent flap and was met with a shocking sight. On the calm water surface, rocks shattered, creating a cracking sound like firecrackers. On the shore, the people's faces turned pale with fear. They thought the mountain god was angry and knelt on the ground to beg for heaven's forgiveness. On the calm land, a wave surged, and a massive impact shattered several precariously balanced rocks. A wide expanse of lake water appeared before them. The canal was actually open. Heaven has repaired the canal. Heaven has shown a miracle. It must be that the crown prince's benevolence has moved heaven. But among the crowd, there were still some who understood. He knew that this must be the princess's work. Complete the canal in 1 day. The princess, she actually did it. But where is the princess? Looking around, they saw Gong Yinma lying quietly on a huge rock, clearly exhausted. Just then, a man pointed in surprise at where Gong Yinma was. Look, everyone, is that a celestial child? The noisy crowd woke the sleeping Gong Yinma. She happened to hear the man's words and, rubbing her eyes, said she was no celestial child. She was just a person of flesh and blood like everyone else. Now that the canal is open, the commotion was just too big. The matter of the explosives probably can't be hidden anymore. A few days ago, that incident was clearly orchestrated by someone with ill intentions, using the common people. Gong Yinma told everyone that a few days ago, someone dug up a giant ding from the river. This should have been an auspicious sign, but unfortunately, the crown prince was slandered because of it, accused of having treacherous intentions, and was even assassinated, his life hanging by a thread. Yet, His Majesty summoned him to the palace at this time. With only a month left to complete the canal, the project was thus delayed. That is why heaven became furious and sent down a thunderclap to repair the canal. This is heaven's clear sign, proving that the crown prince is innocent. Hearing Gong Yinma's words, the commoners all expressed their support for the crown prince. Seeing her goal achieved, Gong Yinma spoke again. Heaven has eyes, sending down a thunderclap to clear the path. Are you all willing to follow the will of heaven and return with me? On the dragon boat, Gong Yinma spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. It was truly laughable. She had gone to great lengths to prepare for him, while his son had achieved a miraculous feat. Yet the emperor was using Gong Ju to threaten her. At Gong Yinma's command, just as the warships were about to set sail, Changshi arrived with an imperial edict. In the past, it was always a junior eunuch who delivered the edicts. This time, it was actually the emperor's personal head eunuch, Changshi. Gong Yinma felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, Changshi's next words confirmed her guess, be why the grace of heaven, the emperor, decrees. Crown Prince Gong Che has defied an edict and delayed his return to the capital. He is hereby stripped of his title as Crown Prince and will be taken into custody and returned to the capital. Depart immediately. Additionally, Changshi told Gong Yinma that the emperor did not know they had delayed for a day to dig the earth and was now furious. If they took too long on the road, the consequences will be dire. Therefore, Changshi stated that it was best to follow the emperor's decree and return to the capital by carriage. Gong Yinma became anxious upon hearing this. Brother Crown Prince's life is hanging by a thread. How can he endure the bumpy journey? If Father Emperor insists, then I can only defy the edict. But it was very clear that Changshi had anticipated that Gong Yinma would defy the imperial edict. So he used Gong Ju to threaten her. Princess, you're only thinking of His Highness the Crown Prince, but do you not care about the life or death of the Ninth Highness? The Ninth Highness, by his own power, killed Louis's commanding general ambushed the enemy forces, burned their provisions, and achieved a world-shaking feat. It's just a pity. Before he could finish, the letter was snatched away by Gong Yinma. It turned out that Louis's main army had arrived ahead of schedule. Gong Ju, alone, was no match for tens of thousands of troops and was pursued relentlessly. He is now missing. Changshi stated that the Ninth Highness has been missing for several days and is likely dead. His Majesty's meaning is if Gong Yinma can hand over the mountain-moving, sea-filling item, he will dispatch an elite force to rescue Gong Ju. Hand over the mountain-moving, sea-filling item. So he knew all along. What achievements overshadowing his master. All of this was just a means to force her to hand over the explosives. His goal had always been the explosives. And to think she had meticulously crafted a birthday gift to surprise him. Because of some explosives, he forgot all past affection, even to the point of not hesitating to harm his own son. It's truly laughable. Gong Ju achieved such a miraculous feat. Yet you don't go to save him, but instead use him to threaten me. Interesting. Truly very interesting. As she spoke, a mouthful of blood sprayed out, clearly from extreme anger. A sarcastic smile appeared on Gong Yinma's lips. An emperor, with 2 sons in mortal danger, was completely indifferent, instead using the lives of these 2 sons to threaten her, an outsider. At this moment, the thought of mutual destruction had already formed in Gong Yinma's heart. I'm going to die anyway. The emperor himself doesn't care, so why should I? At that moment, with the speed of lightning, Gong Yinma moved behind Changshi and directly put him in a chokehold. They say the imperial family is the most heartless. At this moment, the emperor was glaring at her with a hateful expression, wishing he could tear Gong Yinma to pieces. Gong Yinma told Changshi to go back and tell the emperor that she insists on traveling by water. Let the emperor come and punish her himself. The canal leads directly to the capital. Someone in the crowd shouted, "The crown prince is returning to the capital." The emperor had already led his consorts to wait there. The bow of the ship gradually approached. The most eye-catching was the largest ship in the middle, with its magnificent dragon head. Surrounding, there were dozens of small boats. It was the first time the commoners had seen such a sight, and they all marveled at it. Gong Yinma stood on the dragon boat and greeted Gong Sheng. "Long time no see, your majesty." Seeing this scene, Gong Sheng was furious. To build such a dragon boat was simply an act of great treason, a contempt for imperial authority. If it were anyone else seeing such an emperor, they would have been scared to their knees. But alas, this person was Gong Yinma. She was not the least bit intimidated by Gong Sheng's aura and said defiantly that she had come to file a complaint. Gong Sheng, with a grim face, asked her who she wanted. "To accuse that I have 3 complaints, and I hope your majesty will be the judge." Gong Ju, with a cold face, told her to speak. "First complaint. I want to accuse the imperial princes. Brother Crown Prince and I have toiled to repair the canal, yet some princes, far from striving for progress, have repeatedly obstructed us in secret. Their actions are despicable. Second complaint. I want to accuse the great ministers. They spread the rumor that he who repairs the canal will save the world. Do they want me, a woman, to be the emperor?" She pointed to the people behind her and said, "Look clearly. These people all came because of me. I am the one who repaired the canal. I am the one who has won the hearts of the people. If you have an issue, direct it at me. Do not slander the crown prince." This impassioned speech stirred the blood of the commoners, who all shouted their willingness to die for the princess. Third complaint. I want to accuse your majesty. You disregard the bonds of marriage. You are unfit to be a husband. You disregard the bond of father and son. You are unfit to be a father. You disregard the common people. You are unfit to be a ruler. Hearing Gong Yinma say this about him, Gong Sheng's anger surged. Since his ascension, he had been diligent in his duties, reduced taxes, recruited talented individuals, and improved the imperial examinations. On what grounds did she say he had failed the common people? Gong Yinma quickly answered his question. "Because your majesty wants to start a war." As soon as these words were spoken, the commoners began to murmur among themselves. They were going to war? Why hadn't they heard any news about it? At this point, Gong Sheng was still making excuses for himself. He was only trying to defend the country without any effort. What is wrong with that? On the contrary, Gong Yinma possessed this world-destroying weapon but refused to hand it over. What were her intentions? Gong Yinma found it utterly laughable. She asked Gong Sheng what the person who betrayed him had said about the weapon. Gong Sheng didn't hide. It can cleave mountains and rivers and make the sun and moon lose their color. Hearing this, Gong Yinma really wanted to laugh out loud 3 times. And so she did. Since that thing can cleave mountains and rivers, wouldn't it be a pity if I didn't let them witness it? She took out the pre-prepared explosives and threw them directly into the water. She was the emperor's only daughter, yet the emperor thought she was going to rebel and couldn't wait to kill her. Gong Yinma threw the explosives into the river, and under Gong Sheng's puzzled gaze, the river water was blasted into a huge wave. Even the emperor, standing on the high city wall, was not spared. But at this moment, the emperor was exceptionally excited. If he had this thing, what was there to fear from Lei? Not only that, he felt that with the help of this item, he might be able to unify the central plains and become the hegemon of the world. He had to have it. Gong Yinma looked at Gong Sheng on the city wall and asked with a smile, "Father Emperor, look, isn't it amazing?" She told Gong Sheng to open his eyes wide and look at the commoners below. If this thing were ever used in war, the world would surely be plunged into misery and suffering. At that time, even if you become the hegemon of the Central Plains, what would be the use? Gong Sheng was rendered speechless, unable to deny what Gong Yinma said. He couldn't refute it because it was all true. Gong Yinma knelt directly on the boat. She said she was guilty. She held a powerful weapon but did not contribute to the war effort, implicating the crown prince and causing him to be suspected by the emperor, his life and death uncertain. She implicated the 9th emperor, who became a bargaining chip, unable to receive reinforcements. At this sad thought, a line of clear tears rolled down her pretty face. She questioned the emperor. "I am willing to accept all punishments, but Father Emperor, do you still remember that I am your daughter?" Gong Sheng cut off her questioning, telling her not to continue. But Gong Yinma showed no sign of stopping. She kowtowed to Gong Sheng. "Your daughter has 3 more wishes. Please, your majesty, grant them." First wish, she hoped that Father Emperor would not blame the people of the city. They were all implicated by her and escorted her to their deaths. The commoners below, after hearing this, all thanked Gong Yinma. Second wish, she hoped that Father Emperor would release the empress to take care of the crown prince and restore his honors. Third wish, she hoped that Father Emperor would take care of Gong Ju. The most innocent person in this whole affair was Gong Ju. He had been lonely since childhood, and only she had taken care of him. She hoped Father Emperor would not let him be lonely. Hearing Gong Yinma's words, Gong Sheng was very puzzled. This tone sounded like she was giving her last words, which made him uncomfortable. After finishing her 3 wishes, Gong Yinma laughed towards the sky. Then, a huge explosion came from under the dragon boat. The commoners all ran into the distance to escape the aftershock of the explosion. Under Gong Sheng's shocked gaze, Gong Yinma told him another shocking piece of news. "Father Emperor, did you know? This boat was originally intended as a birthday gift for you, but now I don't want to give it to you." She closed her eyes to welcome the arrival of death, her small figure swallowed by the fire. What kind of despair did this girl hold as she leaped into the sea of fire? 7 days had passed since Gong Yinma blew up the boat. The seriously injured crown prince slowly opened his eyes. At his side, the empress was overjoyed to see her son awake. Unexpectedly, the first thing Gong Che asked after waking up was where Gong Yinma was. The empress, with tears in her eyes, told Gong Che everything that had happened. Finally, the empress told him that Gong Yinma had died a noble death to save him and Gong Ju, perishing along with the boat, blown to smithereens. This news was like a bolt from the blue, exploding in Gong Che's ears. He was so overcome with anger that he fainted. At the same time, in the Prince of Ping's residence, Shen Shirya looked at the person who had awakened with a happy face. The woman slowly sat up. Upon closer inspection, this person was none other than Gong Yinma, who was thought to have perished in the sea of fire that day. She had actually been saved by Shen Shirya. But the first thing Gong Yinma did upon waking was to shout that she had to find him. He was now in grave danger in Shizhou, and she had to go save him. Shen Shirya, worried about her health, tried to persuade her to recover from her injuries before going to her death. But with Gong Ju's life hanging in the balance, how could she possibly rest and recover? After thanking Shen Shirya, she hurried towards the door. Before leaving, she didn't forget to ask Shin Shurye to report to the crown prince. Gong Yinma took a carved wooden bird from her sleeve and threw it to Shun. Shurye, after saying that, she left in a hurry. Looking at the wooden bird that resembled himself, Shunshe gritted his teeth in frustration. I, the magnificent and handsome heir apparent, am seen in this light in her eyes. He shouted for Gong Yinma to come back and give him an explanation. But even if Shan Shurye turned the whole house upside down, Gong Yinma wouldn't be able to hear him. On the desolate plains of Shizhou at night, snow was falling heavily. Gong Ju, seriously injured, was hiding behind a large rock. Not far away, the voices of Li's soldiers could be heard. How much longer does the general want us to wait here? This desolate plain is full of the miasma of war. That kid might have died long ago. Gong Ju bit down on a flower. With this flower, he wouldn't have to fear the miasma. There was still a small squad outside. He had to find a way to distract them. He hung a Lui soldier from a tree, using the body to lure them over. Then he threw a stone. A thudding sound came from behind the soldier, who immediately became alert, gathered his men, and headed towards the trap Gong Ju had set. Soon, a soldier noticed something was wrong. Oh no, it's a trap. Retreat. This is definitely the fiercest man I've ever seen, single-handedly fighting against a Lui squad of dozens. Unexpectedly, the Lui men easily fell into the trap set by Gong Ju, but it was obviously too late to retreat now. Gong Ju appeared behind them in a flash. A sword blade swept past, and several soldiers had already taken one step into the underworld. Just then, the shouts of Lui soldiers came from behind Gong Ju. Quick, don't let him get away. Ha, just like that. You think you can catch me? Your movements are too slow, aren't they? When Gong Ju heard this voice, it was incredibly familiar. Gong Yinma hid behind a tree, secretly pleased with herself. Although my injuries haven't healed, you think you can catch me with just a few shrimp soldiers and crab generals? You're dreaming. She turned to run elsewhere, but bumped into a broad, solid chest. Smelling the familiar scent on Gong Yinma, Gong Ju held her tightly in his arms. The snow fell gently, and the two figures embraced tightly. Unexpectedly, Gong Yinma fell asleep in Gong Ju's arms. Clearly, she hadn't rested well on her anxious journey to find Gong Ju. In the cave, Gong Ju had already lit a fire. Imperial sister came all this way to find me. You must be exhausted, with her injuries not yet healed and the long, bumpy journey. Gong Yinma curled up, exclaiming how cold it was. Gong Ju lay down beside her and pulled her into his embrace. Feeling the warmth coming from his side, Gong Yinma unconsciously turned over, her small hands tightly wrapped around Gong Ju's waist, her small face buried in his chest. Gong Ju was, of course, happy to see this happen. With a beauty in his arms, he slept soundly. The next morning, Gong Yinma was awakened by the tightness of his embrace. This kid's strength is too much. She didn't expect that the little Gong Ju would grow up to be even more handsome. His features were becoming more and more refined, and the more she looked, the more he had the air of the future regent king. Under Gong Yinma's fervent gaze, the pretending to be asleep Gong Ju had no choice but to wake up, his handsome face blushing crimson. Imperial sister, staring at me so intently like this, I can't sleep even if I want to. A familiar pain came. Gong Yinma pinched Gong Ju's handsome face and asked him if he had been eating well. Look how thin you've gotten. There's no meat on you. But it still feels so good to pinch. The wind and sand of Shizhou surprisingly didn't make your skin rough. Next was time to check his homework. Gong Yinma told him to spar with her to see if he had been slacking off recently and if his martial arts had improved. Unexpectedly, Gong Ju slapped his hand on the ground, and with a grab and a hug, he pinned Gong Yinma down. Imperial sister, it's cold outside, and we haven't seen each other in so long. Let's talk more. Gong Yinma said, you can talk, but why are you so close? It's so embarrassing. Gong Ju said it was because he was cold. As he spoke, he kept pressing his big head against Gong Yinma's face. He was clearly not a child anymore, but he could only hold her like this in the capacity of a child. But at least you let me hold you like this, which is not bad. After several days of long travel, Gong Yinma finally reached Gong Ju's side. Looking at the handsome and elegant young man, Gong Yinma's face flushed. She told Gong Ju, you should smile. Less in the future. If you keep smiling like that, you're going to steal people's souls. Gong Ju thought, I wish I really could steal yours. A rumbling sound broke the slightly ambiguous atmosphere. Seeing Gong Yinma's blushing face, Gong Ju was no longer in the mood to tease her and prepared to get her something to eat. He picked some fresh fruit for Gong Yinma, but ate wolf meat himself. The wolves in these wastelands grow up eating human flesh, so the taste isn't good. Gong Yinma told him to eat the fruit with her, but Gong Ju said there were only a few fruits in total. Imperial Sister should eat them. I've eaten a lot of wolf meat recently and have gotten used to it. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Gong Yinma threw away the bone, picked up a piece of wolf meat, and brought it to her mouth. Gong Ju grabbed her wrist. Imperial Sister, you can't eat this. Gong Yinma asked defiantly, why can you eat it, but I can't? Gong Ju took a bite of the meat, his lips lightly brushing against Gong Yinma's fingertips. Why Imperial Sister should have the best of everything, no matter the circumstances. Gong Yinma thought with difficulty, I have a lot of food in my space, but I don't have a bag with me. How can I explain it? Forget it. I can't worry about that much. Gong Yinma took out a Chinquan bag from her sleeve, opened it, and poured its contents onto the ground. Modern ice cream, potato chips, everything you could imagine. Gong Ju was incredulous. This was too beyond common sense. Could it be that Imperial Sister is not immortal? Imperial Sister, will you suddenly disappear one day? At this moment, a huge sense of panic flashed in Gong Ju's heart. Gong Yinma said embarrassedly, this bag can only hold things, but it can't hold living creatures. Was revealing all this at once too much of a shock for an ordinary person? Unexpectedly, Gong Ju promised her with great seriousness that he would absolutely not tell anyone. But Imperial Sister, will you leave me one day? Anyway, no matter what, you can't leave me. Home, why would I leave? Rummaging, she also took out a bottle of wine, intending to drink with Gong Ju. Gong Ju said, Imperial Sister, I'm so worried you'll leave, so panicked and scared. How can you not feel anything? An hour later, Gong Yinma was drunk and leaning against Gong Ju's chest, enjoying the snow. Soon, Gong Yinma fell asleep, nestled in Gong Ju's arms. Looking at her slightly pouting, cherry-like lips, Gong Ju held his breath and slowly lowered his head, kissing the fragrant lips he had coveted for so long. Just as Gong Ju wanted to explore further, Gong Yinma frowned in discomfort and pushed Gong Ju away. Since leaving the cold palace, he hadn't seen his Imperial Sister this closely in a long time. If only the two of them could stay like this forever, how wonderful would that be? His fingers brushed against Gong Yinma's slightly swollen lips. He lowered his head again. Gong Yinma's clothes had already slipped to her shoulders. Younger brother? So what? Blood relatives? So what? He couldn't be without her. At this moment, looking at the beloved person beneath him, how could Gong Ju control himself? Just as he was about to take a further step, the chaotic sound of horse hooves shattered this warm moment. This little couple, about to do something naughty, was interrupted by a group of clueless lay people. Helpless, Gong Ju could only carry the drunk Gong Yinma and flee outside. At this time, Luis, soldiers had already reached the cave where the two were. The leading commander ordered his men to check inside the cave. A soldier reported back that the fire was not extinguished and the hay was still warm. They probably hadn't gone far. The leader quickly ordered his men to give chase. At this moment, Gong Ju was inwardly annoyed. How could he be so careless? The jostling in his arms woke the sleeping Gong Ju. Gong Ju told her that the Luis soldiers were chasing them and told her to continue sleeping. He could shake them off. Gong Yinma slapped her forehead in annoyance. Drinking really messes things up. She quickly told Gong Ju to put her down. With the vast white snow, walking like this was not a solution. They had come on horseback. Gong Yinma suggested that the best thing to do now was to snatch a horse from them. But Gong Ju, considering Gong Yinma's physical condition, said if we do that, Imperial Sister's body won't be able to take it. But soon, Gong Yinma thought of a good idea. The two of them would split up. Gong Yinma would lie in ambush, and as soon as they arrived, she would throw out thunderfire to spook their horses. Once the horses were spooked, they would surely run wild, and they could take this opportunity to snatch a horse. Things went just as Gong Yinma had planned. Gong Yinma showed herself to attract their attention, to buy time for Gong Ju. The time I can hold them off is limited. Gong Ju this. Tom, it's up to you. Gong Yinma threw a few grenades in front of them. With a few bangs, they exploded. The Luis soldiers had never seen this kind of weapon and dared not pursue rashly. A commander raised his bow and aimed at Gong Yinma's back. He had to capture Gong Yinma alive to find out the secret of that weapon. The sharp arrowhead flew straight towards Gong Yinma. At this critical moment, Gongju threw a dart, deflecting the flying arrow. The Duke, who had arrived with the arrow, successfully snatched her up. He pulled Gong Yimo onto his back and held her in his arms. Only after feeling that familiar warmth did he finally relax. He had been truly terrified just now. The two rode off into the distance. Watching the pair disappear before his eyes, a soldier said mockingly, "How foolish. Do they think Lord Yezliangju is a horse that just anyone can ride away on?" He raised a hand to his lips and whistled. Hearing the sound, the horse reared up, about to turn back the way it came. But the Duke raised a dagger. He stabbed it fiercely into the horse's rump. A sharp pain shot through the horse, and it went wild. How could it possibly listen to commands now? It bolted straight ahead. Dozens of low-wise, iron-clad cavalrymen gave chase in their direction. Just as the two were about to be surrounded, the army of Dei arrived in the nick of time. They were the elite troops sent by the emperor. They're finally here. The Duke announced his identity and asked the soldiers to escort them back to Shizhou. Soon, the two sides were locked in a fierce battle. This beautiful man before them was none other than Si Wuyan, known as Gue Jianshou, the one even ghosts fear. Legend had it that anyone he saved would eventually be killed by him. Gong Yimo and the Duke made a perilous escape, but by now, Gong Yimo had fallen unconscious. The imperial physician said the situation was extremely dire. Originally, Gong Yimo only had an external wound, but now she had also been struck by a poisoned arrow. With her internal injuries unhealed and having lost so much blood, he was afraid. The Duke's fierce gaze fell upon the imperial physician. Afraid of what? The king of Jinshi, fearing the Duke would direct his anger at the physician, quickly told him that he had already posted a notice to recruit famous doctors. The princess will be fine. Once the notice was posted, a large crowd gathered around it. A few days ago, the reward was 5,000 taels, but in just a few days, it had risen to 100,000 taels of gold. Some wanted to try, but the last line of the notice stated that if the treatment failed, the penalty was execution by being cut in half at the waist. Although the reward was enormous, they didn't dare risk losing their lives over a moment of carelessness. Just then, a long, slender hand reached out and took the notice. The man had a vermilion mark between his brows and an indescribably ethereal air about him. Execution by waist chopping if it doesn't go well. Interesting. It's been a long time since I've encountered such an interesting request for medical help. In Gong Yimo's bedchamber, the Duke carefully wiped the corner of her mouth. Imperial sister, it's because I'm useless. I can't even find a single doctor who can wake you. I can save her, a man said, his jade-like hand gently stroking a lock of long hair. The Duke was still in disbelief, but when the man said his name was Si Wuyan, the Duke immediately asked what his conditions were. He had heard of this name, Gue Jianshou, Si Wuyan. Legend said his medical skills were superb, but he had a strange habit. The people he saved, he would also find a way to kill. In his eyes, life and death were nothing more than a game. Si Wuyan asked what price he could afford to pay. With a determined look in his eyes, the Duke uttered two words, "My everything." Si Wuyan's lips curled into a smile as he asked, including, "Your life." After an afternoon of treatment, Gong Yimo quickly woke up. Just as Gong Yimo accidentally touched the Duke's wrist, he quickly pulled his hand away. Sensing something was wrong, she yanked up the Duke's sleeve. What met her eyes were rows of bloody wounds. Gong Yimo asked him how he got these scars, but the Duke tried to change the subject with an excuse. However, Si Wuyan, who was standing aside, told Gong Yimo it was because of her. He went on to tell Gong Yimo that only his blood could save her, so the scars on his wrist were from when he was letting blood for her. Gong Yimo could hardly believe it. Only the blood of a blood relative could save her? That was utter nonsense. The Duke was not related to her in any way. That bastard Si Wuyan actually dared to trick the Duke into letting blood. That's right, Gong Yimo knew Si Wuyan. In her past life, they had quite a history. Then, Si Wuyan leaned close to Gong Yimo and said, "You've lost so much blood and are deeply poisoned. It seems the blood your good little brother contributed isn't enough. If this drags on, the poison will eventually enter your lungs." How could Gong Yimo possibly try to kill her own savior? What on earth was going on? Si Wuyan told Gong Yimo that if the Duke let any more blood, his body would surely be overwhelmed and he would die from excessive blood loss. The Duke immediately said he could continue letting blood. Are you kidding? This was the only chance to save his imperial sister. As long as it could save her, he would do anything. A sharp slapping sound echoed. At this moment, Gong Yimo wished she could kill Si Wuyan. He was clearly doing this on purpose. Gong Yimo ordered someone to bring the medicine she usually drank. The medicinal primer could stop bleeding, accumulate blood, and suppress bleeding. In short, she would not allow them to use the Duke's blood again. As she finished speaking, Si Wuyan, who was standing aside, stated that his medicine was extremely potent. If it wasn't mixed with the Duke's blood, she would surely die if she drank it. The Duke, also worried about the medicine's efficacy, stepped forward to persuade Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo ignored him, grabbed the medicine bowl, and drank it all in one gulp. The Duke beside her watched with extreme nervousness. After she finished the medicine, Gong Yimo reassured him, "See, I'm fine. This man is too wicked. He's doing it on purpose." The Duke automatically ignored the latter half of her sentence. Seeing that Gong Yimo was fine, his heart finally settled. Having not closed his eyes for days, he was physically exhausted and fainted directly into Gong Yimo's arms. Gong Yimo's heart ached that you've lost so much blood. Aren't you tired? Sleep peacefully. Imperial Sister will help you repay the harm he has done to you. Nearby, Si Wuyan stretched lazily. It's a rare sight to see such a scene of sibling self-destruction. What a pity it was ruined. This shameless brat really had ill intentions. Gong Yimo settled the Duke onto the bed. Everyone said that Gue Jianshou, Si Wuyan, was notoriously cold-blooded, saving people only to let them die in a different way. You can do whatever you want to me, but if you hurt the Duke, then you can go to hell. Gong Yimo suddenly grabbed Si Wuyan by the throat. Looking into her eyes, Si Wuyan felt an unprecedented sense of crisis flash through his heart. She wasn't joking. She really wanted to kill him. They were clearly not siblings born of the same mother, yet they trusted each other so much, even willing to risk their lives for one another. And himself? He had no attachments in this world anyway. It would be good to die. That way, he could escape this fate of being a puppet, manipulated and played with at will. At this moment, Si Wuyan's heart was filled with sorrow. Just as he was quietly awaiting the arrival of death, Gong Yimo released her hand and threw him to the ground. They say Gue Jianchao's word is his bond. If you say you'll save someone, you won't let them die. So, are you going to continue saving me or not? Si Wuyan stated that since he had promised to save her, he certainly would. And then I'll make your life a living hell. After speaking, he leaned close to Gong Yimo and said, "Take a good look at your little brother. He still has a surprise waiting for you." What on earth had happened to this pink-faced youth? Because the Duke had used his own blood as medicine for her, Gong Yimo had been unconscious for more than 10 days. She said he'd been lying down for days and was getting moldy. She told him to quickly take off his clothes so she could give him a sponge bath. Hearing this, the Duke's handsome face was instantly dyed with a blush, and he stammered that he could wipe himself. Gong Yimo dismissively uttered a single word, and the Duke immediately became an obedient baby, quietly doing as he was told. When Gong Yimo was applying the medicine, she was completely focused, but for the Duke, it was an unbearable ordeal. During this time, he had tried to see his Imperial Sister as just a sister, but no matter how he tried to restrain himself, he couldn't. Imperial Sister, I can no longer restrain my feelings for you. If loving you is a poison, then you are my only antidote. Gong Yimo was completely unaware of his thoughts. If only she had been more careful back then, the Duke wouldn't have let so much blood for her. She told the Duke to lift his trouser leg so she could apply some medicine to the wounds on his leg as well. Unsurprisingly, the Duke refused, but his protest was clearly ineffective. Gong Yimo lifted the blanket, her jade-like hand caressing his legs. She lifted his thin trousers, and what met her eyes were bandages already stained red with blood. Gong Yimo now understood. So this was the secret Si Wuyan had mentioned. She asked the Duke what on earth had happened. His leg, why was it in such a state? The Duke smiled and comforted her, as if he were the one who was injured. He told Gong Yimo not to worry. The wounds had already scabbed over. Because Si Wuyan said a medicinal primer was needed, before he could finish, Gong Yimo interrupted him. Her delicate little face was already, "You fool, if he told you to die, would you go and die?" The Duke replied, "As long as he said it could save you, I would do it, even if it meant giving up my own life. Besides, my blood is for my Imperial Sister to consume. Although it's a bit strange, in a way, our flesh and blood have merged." At this, Gong Yimo cried even more sorrowfully. The Duke's heart ached as he held her in his arms, clumsily comforting her. Gong Yimo sobbed, saying that normally, if he even got a little scrape or bump, her own heart would ache. "You are the person on the tip of my heart." What did she mean? Her heart ached even if he got a scrape. The Duke thought his imperial sister was incredibly cute at this moment. He leaned closer to her. He wanted to stop that chattering little mouth, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and held back. How could he let his imperial sister know of his shameless thoughts? How could he let his imperial sister suffer the world's condemnation? He gave a bitter smile and finally pulled Gong Yimo into his arms, patiently comforting her, saying he didn't regret it. Because imperial sister is also the one I place on the tip of my heart. They say it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Just because Gong Yimo had previously wanted to kill Si Wuyin, that guy almost sent her to the afterlife with a dose of Crane's Crown red poison. In the end, she had searched her entire portable space and couldn't find a medicine to treat the Duke. She thought of that guy, Si Wuyin. He must have a lot of good medicine on him. With that thought, she went straight to find Si Wuyin. In Si Wuyin's bedchamber, the two sat facing each other. Si Wuyin, his face covered in a cold sweat, asked her what she was doing here. He hadn't forgotten that this was the girl who had almost sent him to have tea with the king of hell. I just want to know, as the infamous Gue Jian Shou, when will you heal my injuries? Si Wuyin calmly told her to rest assured. With him around, she wouldn't die. Hearing this, a sweet smile appeared on Gong Yimo's little face, and she thanked Si Wuyin with exaggerated admiration. Si Wuyin could hardly bear to look. Just yesterday, she wanted to strangle him, and today, she was acting all cute. A thick-skinned woman is truly terrifying. After the foreplay was done, Gong Yimo got straight to the point. She said magnanimously, "If you are willing to contribute one pill, I will not pursue what you did to Gongju before." After speaking, she even threw a coquettish glance his way. Seeing this, Si Wuyin spat out a mouthful of tea. Gong Yimo said, "Although you are the puppet emperor of Yuqi, you are also raised by the Empress Dowager of Yuqi herself. I believe you still have some good things, right?" As soon as these words were spoken, Si Wuyin's face was filled with shock. That's right, having been reborn, Gong Yimo naturally knew Si Wuyin's true identity. With a profound and inscrutable look, she said, "The weather is nice today. Why don't we go out and talk?" Outside the city of Shizhou, Si Wuyin couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked Gong Yimo how she knew his identity. Gong Yimo didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked, "What made you want to harm me and the Duke?" Si Wuyin decided to play dumb to the end, pretending he didn't know what she was talking about. Gong Yimo directly laid out his plan. First, make the Duke give up his arm to weaken his strength. Once his guard was down, he would take the opportunity to kill him. As for saving her, it was because he wanted to use the Yu poison in her body to control their genes. Si Wuyin had been controlled by the vicious Empress Dowager since childhood, serving as a puppet emperor for over 20 years. He thought there was no salvation for him in this world, but he never expected that when he was in danger, the one to save him would be the very woman who had wanted to kill him. After exposing Si Wuyin's identity as the emperor, Gong Yimo planned to make a deal with him. As long as he left behind the antidote and the elixir that could regenerate flesh and muscle, she would promise to keep his secret. From then on, they would go their separate ways and have nothing more to do with each other. Si Wuyin smiled wickedly and said he could give her the medicine, but do you dare to take it?